In 7th grade, we took an end-of-the-year field trip to an aquarium near school. It was called Ripley's Aquarium of the Smokies. We live in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, a literal mountain town, with nothing but hills and mountains as far as the eyes can see. Our science teacher, Mr. Russo, was our chaperone for the trip. He was a very lax teacher, so while other teacher chaperones were more uptight and strict with their groups, Mr. Russo was more chill about his job. That may seem like a good thing, but because of his lackadaisical approach at supervising, my friend Aiden and I were able to easily bail from the aquarium lobby away from the rest of the groups. We quite simply didn't want to wait so long for all the groups to move. The whole aquarium was empty, except for our classes, so when Aiden and I walked through the passageways, or I guess observation areas as you would say, before everyone else, we didn't see anyone else. We got the best views at all the big fish tanks and habitats. We moved on to the next dark room, all of which were lit up with a dark blue tint from the fish tanks, by the way. This room had a lot of big tanks with tropical fish. We were making jokes about finding Nemo fish like clownfish and the dory fish, and that's when I remember someone calling "hey" to us in a very assertive, commanding voice. It was some guy in cargo shorts and a green t-shirt. He asked us if we were with the field trip. I was about to shake my head no, but Aiden said yes. The man told us to come with him right now. We both assumed he worked for the aquarium, so we followed. He wasn't leading us back to the lobby though. He was leading us through some narrow, dark hallways. I remember passing the bathrooms and a few exit signs hanging on the ceiling before reaching an exit door. He led us outside to some back area, I guess by the woods. I finally asked if he worked there and where he was leading us. He said yes, he did work there, and that he had to drive us back around to the front of the aquarium in order to be let back in. It made just as much sense back then as it does now, but we were two nervous 7th graders who thought we were about to get in serious trouble. So when he led us to his car, we willingly got in the back seats. He told us to strap in, and he pulled out from the back parking lot and onto the street. Just as we thought he was going to make a right turn towards the front, he turned left. Right away, both Aiden and I asked him where he was going at the same time. He didn't answer that question, but about 5 seconds later, we heard the locks to the back doors click down, and he made some kind of threat along the lines of, "If either of you try to make any moves, I'll kill you." He then proceeded to slide out what appeared to be a big knife in his glove box as some kind of threat. Aiden and I sat in silence. I'm sure he wanted to throw up just like I wanted to. We had to think of a way to escape, but we couldn't talk to each other because the man kept looking in the rearview mirror every other second. He was driving us uphill through some woodsy, isolated neighborhood until he finally pulled over onto the side of the road in what appeared to be the middle of nowhere. No houses, no through traffic. He told us to stay in the car as he got out, with his knife in his hand. I whispered to Aiden to be prepared to run as soon as I said to. The man came to my door, popped it open, and told me to step out. He told me to tell my friend that if he wants me alive, he better be in the car by the time we got back. I felt a deepening feeling in my stomach when I heard that. The man started walking me to the woods with the knife probably in his pocket, to do God knows what. I saw Aiden sliding over to my side of the car, which had an unlocked door, and when he seemed ready to run, I screamed "run." Aiden was off already, running downhill. I easily dodged the man as I fled past him, following Aiden. The man tried chasing us on foot, and I'm not even kidding when I say he threw the knife at me. He missed with only maybe a few inches to spare. I heard the clanging of the knife hitting the ground ahead of me. I didn't stop to pick it up. I just kept running downhill in the direction we came. The man stopped following after throwing the knife. I think he got back in his car and fled the scene. We somehow managed to make it back to the aquarium in under an hour, and we also managed to sneak back into the group. Mr. Russo didn't even notice. Aiden and I decided to keep quiet about what just happened. What purpose would it serve getting ourselves in trouble given that there was relatively no chance of that man getting caught? As we got older, we started to wonder more and more what the intentions of that man were. We could obviously think of a few likely ones, but either way, we kept quiet about it and don't really like to think about it. When I was in 8th grade, all of my classmates and I looked forward to our Washington, D.C. field trip. The thrill of going on any sort of trip with your friends was enough to excite us. After all preparations, we were ready for D.C. Once we arrived to our destination, my class of around 100 students were partitioned off into 3 groups, and within these groups were our 3 other hotel mates. Each group was sent off in different coach buses, and we would be taken to different attractions throughout DC, neighboring states, monuments, parks, food stops, museums, and more. After a long weekend of visiting educational sites, our teachers decided to treat us to a colonial ghost tour one night. It was an evening walking tour through some of America's historical sites near village cemeteries and old townhomes. I don't remember exactly which city we were in, but I remember the guides telling us that many of the empty homes were preserved due to their historical significance. I've always been scared of most things related to ghosts and such, but I was positive that nothing would happen in our ghost tour. We split off into smaller groups of around 10 members each, and were instructed to carry around a camera if we wished. The guide kept telling us not to expect much from the tour, that there would most likely be nothing supernatural during the course of the evening. As we wandered from colonial home to cemetery plot to colonial home, I just took interest in the histories that the guides would share of each home. They would indulge us in the stories of each homeowner while my friends would snap away at photos, hoping to find a shiny orb. One of my friends, Jessica, that I was sharing a room with during that trip, was not one of the kids that were constantly taking pictures. She would take a photograph every once in a while, but spent most of the time listening. My group reached a small 2-story home in the middle of the street. The house had an ominous blue hue to the windows, but the house was vacant. I remember being very curious about this home. The tour guide began to tell us a little bit about the house. She had mentioned that the home had originally belonged to a man and his beautiful wife. He adored his wife, and the couple was thrilled to receive news that they would be expecting a child. Unfortunately, the wife had died after giving birth to a baby girl. The man was absolutely devastated and grew to resent his homely daughter. During her childhood, he kept her in the house as much as he could. He reminded her about how homely she looked and could not find her a suitor. Feeling that she had no other purpose, he had his daughter learn how to sew and weave upstairs, using her only good attribute, her hands. After hearing this story, I remember the sorrow that I felt for this girl. She and her father must have lived unhappily in that house until their deaths. My friend Jessica took a photograph of the house, and we both moved on to the next house. I kept walking until Jessica stopped and became silent, looking down in her digital camera screen. I walked over and scanned the photograph. I saw a gleam coming from the edge of the second-floor window on the right. I had her zoom on the scene. After zooming in, you could clearly see 3 figures staring out from the window. On the way right was the translucent outline of a woman. A taller man was standing behind her to the side. Even more curiously, there was a third figure. It appeared to be a woman, but she was harder to make out. The body was there for sure, but her skin was not as clear. Jessica and I freaked out. The first woman and man made sense to me. That would explain the man and his daughter. But who was this third dark woman off the side? I raised my hand and had to ask the guide, was there ever another person that lived with this family at the house we just looked at? The guide looked surprised at my question and answered, yeah, during the time of their residence, they had a black female servant living with them. Senior year of high school. My forensics teacher, Mr. Stevenson, somehow convinced the school to let him take us on a field trip to some abandoned building in the woods that was the site of a major crime scene. I think he might have finessed it a bit and made the school think we'd just be studying the perimeter and outside of the building, but we did much more than that. Mainly, it used to be a drug den. When we got there, I realized how frighteningly tall the building actually was, and its location was just surreal, surrounded by forest in every direction, and the only road that leads up to it is a road you would never think to drive down just because of the grass growing in the street. Since our current topic at the time of our class was dealing with drugs, Mr. Stevenson led us into the abandoned building. He gave a tour of the place as if he'd been there many times before, and he seemed to know quite a bit of history about the building. For example, that the actual original purpose of the building was unknown. Apparently, construction on the higher levels wasn't even finished before the building was abandoned. Its location and size made it ideal for drug deals and other illegal activity to take place, which surprised all of us since there we were inside of this apparent former drug den for a school field trip. Mr. Stevenson was so laxed about this trip that he didn't even notice when a couple students wandered off to explore on their own. Or maybe he just didn't care. Given that a few other students did it, me and my friend Gianna, or G, decided to go off on our own too. And yes, I'm a guy. I just so happened to have a really close friend that was a girl back in high school. There had to be at least 8 floors in this building, but we saw from the outside the top few floors looked unfinished. I basically forced G to come all the way upstairs with me to the top few floors. Worst came to worst, we wouldn't be able to find the group again, and we just returned to the bus right outside. We climbed the stairs, one flight after another. It was weird. As we reached the middle floors, the amount of debris and graffiti lessened a bit, but then as we got to the higher floors, there was even more graffiti and litter than the lower floors. Then things got sketchy. It seemed we were on the second highest floor, and everything on this floor was still just wood foundation. A lot of it seemed to be rotting, and there were a lot of holes up there. We would have gone up to the last floor, but the stairs had been completely stripped and broken. Basically, there were no stairs to the last floor. There had to be a way up there, though. So we watched our step for weak wood as we navigated the floor. Then, Gianna grabbed my shoulder and stopped me. She pointed up at a hole in the ceiling and said she saw something. Then there was a ticking noise, like the kind of ticking noise a person makes when they're calling their cat or something. Followed by that, someone's arm came into view from the hole above us. Just their arm, though, and judging by the position of the arm, whoever's arm it was must have been laying down flat on the floor beside the hole. They had a long black sleeve on, so the only skin that was visible was their hand. G was scared. I laughed a little at first, but I'm not going to say it wasn't slightly unnerving. Gianna started telling me let's go back down. I started calling up to the person, how do we get up there? They didn't answer. Instead, they just kept making the ticking noise and waving us up. That's when things started getting really creepy, and I agreed with G that we should go back down. Right after I said this, the person pulled their arm out from the hole, and we heard the sound of a shoe quickly scrape the wood foundation above us as the person was clearly getting up. We couldn't see, though. I nudged Gianna to move. I was creeped out and just wanted to get back down. As we were about to leave the main open layout room and back into the stairway corridor, there was a crash far behind us. We turned and saw a man on the complete opposite side of the room, facing the wall. It seemed he just jumped through one of the holes. He then quickly turned his head to look at us, without moving his body. There was something about his face and clothing. He didn't look like the typical urban exploration type. He looked dangerous and unstable. G and I ran for it now, down one flight of stairs at a time. 3 flights down, I looked up the long corridor above us and saw the man at top looking down at me. I yelled go to Gianna. We kept going down. Like 5 flights later, I looked up again, and there was the man again, looking down at me. This time he seemed much closer, and I just realized he'd been chasing us. We got to the bottom, and I looked up one more time, and I didn't see him this time. We heard the voice of Mr. Stevenson nearby, and I kind of started to laugh about what just happened. Not exactly because I found it funny, but because I was just happy that we made it back safely. G was not laughing, though. She was genuinely disturbed. We found Mr. Stevenson, who asked where we were, and we told the truth about what just happened. He was pretty mad at us, but given what we just told him, he also advised we should leave the building. The other kids who wandered off had returned, and when we got to the bus, Mr. Stevenson did a head count like 3 times. Overall, the trip wasn't a failure for the rest. The other kids did learn things about the building and drugs, but for my friend Gianna and I, really, it was the most horrific thing we ever went through. My name is Patrick McCabe. I've always had really messed up teeth growing up, like atrociously bad. Due to that and a few other things, I got my wisdom teeth out really late in life. Most people who undergo the process get them out sometime in high school or at the very latest early into their college years, but I was different. I didn't even sit down for a consultation until after graduating college. The process was incredibly painful and one of the most irritating things I've gone through in my entire life. I'm not going to bore you with all the details about my recovery, but there is something you need to know. For whatever reason, the pain I was experiencing was so bad that I couldn't sleep through the night without taking pain medication. I developed this system where I would wake myself up every 3 hours to take another pill, cycling between the 2 medications I'd been prescribed. It was awful, but it was the only thing I could do to prevent these massive toothaches that would quite literally have me in tears. It should go without saying that my sleep schedule was downright awful during that period. My body started getting used to 3-hour cycles of sleep, followed by periods of being awake, and it was difficult to return to normal even after my recovery was over. That was honestly the worst part, the sleep. It was not normal, I'm telling you. I didn't even feel human after a while. It was like I had become something else, constantly waking up and going back to sleep. I don't even want to think about it. One night, I'm pretty sure it was during the first week of recovery, I was up at like 4 a.m. to take my meds again. For whatever reason, I couldn't fall back asleep afterwards. I don't know if it was because of my condition or because the AC had stopped working, but it was really hot in my room, way hotter than usual. I remember tossing and turning for like 10 minutes before deciding I had to do something about the heat. The only thing I could think of was to open my bedroom window, which I did. That helped a little bit, but I still couldn't sleep. So there I was, lying there miserably in bed, praying with every fiber of my being that I just fall asleep. But of course, I didn't. At one point, I started picking up on this strange noise coming from outside my window. I never slept with my window open, so at first, I figured it was just some normal outside sound that I wasn't used to hearing. But the more I listened, the more I got the feeling that it wasn't a normal sound. It sounded almost like scratching, as if some kind of animal were dragging its claws on something. That's the best way I can describe it. At one point, the noise got louder, and I realized it sounded like it was coming from above me, from the roof. And then, a few seconds later, the noise started moving above me, gradually fading out of earshot. I was pretty positive at that point that it was some kind of critter messing around on the roof. My family lives in a woodsy area, so we've had our fair share of curious raccoons and pest infestations. I really wanted to just ignore it and go back to sleep, but I knew my dad would be livid if something burrowed into our attic again, so I had to do something. Plus, it wasn't like I was on the brink of falling asleep anyway. I was wide awake. So without much thought, I threw my covers off, jumped out of bed, and started making my way to the garage. From there, I grabbed one of my dad's heavy-duty flashlights and walked back through the house to the back door. My room sits on the first floor near the back of the house where the roof is the lowest, so I figured I'd check over there first. I made it to the spot outside my bedroom window and started sweeping the flashlight beam across the roof. I didn't see anything up there, so I sighed and figured the animal had crawled to a different part of the roof in the time it had taken me to get outside. I started walking around the house, trying my best to illuminate as much of the roof as possible. All I really needed to do was scare the animal away, which would be pretty easy if I could just find the damn thing. I was standing near the front of the house where the roof is nearly twice as high when I spotted something shift in the corner of my flashlight beam. With one quick flick of my wrist, I shot the flashlight toward the spot I had seen movement and nearly passed out. There, standing on the roof, was a person. Not an animal, not a pack of animals, but a fully grown human being. There was a naked human being standing on my roof, frozen in the beam of my flashlight. I screamed, I couldn't help it, and as soon as I did, The person on the roof started moving, almost like they were allergic to the light of my flashlight. I tried to trace their movements with the light, but they were absurdly fast. Until that moment, I didn't know it was possible to move so fast barefoot, let alone on the loose shingles of an uneven roof. They started making their way back to where my room was, and I sprinted around the house to intercept them. I don't even know what I was thinking. I should have just ran back inside, but there was some deep instinct in me that prevented me from backing off. I yelled for my dad as I ran, hoping he'd be able to get outside in time to help me ward off or restrain the psycho on our roof. I made it to the back of the house just in time to see the person preparing to jump off the roof. My first thought was that there was no way. There was absolutely no way a person could jump off that roof without suffering serious injuries, even from that lower point. Surely they'd have to find another way down. But without hesitation, the person jumped, slamming into the concrete with a deafening thump. The shock of what I was seeing had me frozen in place at that point. I couldn't even process what was going on because of how insane it was that someone had actually just jumped off our roof. I don't know how he didn't shatter every bone in his legs. My dazed shock only lasted a split second, but that was enough. The person immediately got up off the paver stones and charged toward me, tackling me to the ground. He started clawing at my eyes, almost like he was trying to rip my face off. I screamed and kicked, but I couldn't get him off me. He was grunting and spitting, and there was no logical explanation for how someone like that could be so strong. I started feeling blood pouring down my face, and in that moment, I thought I was going to die. But then, over the sound of my own screaming, I heard the back door burst open. Seconds later, my dad was pulling the person off of me, cursing and yelling like it was life or death. I got up off the ground just in time to see that psycho breaking free of my dad's grasp, completely covered in my blood. Instead of continuing to attack me or my dad, he ran to the edge of our yard, scaled our backyard fence, and disappeared into the darkness. My dad and I stood there in shock while the sounds of his footsteps crashing through the forest faded into the distance. I'll fast forward through the rest. I had to go to the hospital that night. My dad almost crashed just trying to get me there. I had lost a ton of blood, and the doctors had to give me all sorts of shots to prevent me from getting any infections or diseases that guy might have had. It was a nightmare. The one saving grace was that my mouth was basically untouched, so my teeth didn't need to be re-examined. The police were useless, not like they could have done much anyway. They said searching the woods would be unfeasible given how vast it was, and insisted that simple security cameras would have prevented the whole thing. My dad later discovered that the person on the roof had been trying to dig into our attic, just like an animal would. Ironically, it wasn't my dad or me who was the most affected. It was my mom. She cried about this incident so many times, and she was actually the one who went ahead and upped our home security. I still have no explanation for what happened that night. Who that guy was, where he had come from, and how he had even found our house are just a few of the 1,000 questions about that night that I fear will never be answered. My house is a very unique design. Well, I call it unique, but I bet a lot of people would call it weird instead. And actually, they have. The vast majority of friends I've hosted have all said so, even a handful of girls I've snuck in while my parents were away. As much as I'd love to make things easy for myself and just attach a bunch of photos of the house, I don't think my parents would appreciate that too much. So instead, I'll just tell you the important details. As it pertains to the story, there's really only one you need to know. You know how most houses have a porch or a walkway leading up to the front door, and there's usually some sort of covering above the door, maybe called a door canopy? Well, my house basically has a covered hallway that you have to walk through before entering the actual interior. Imagine your own front door, part of the house on either side, and then push the front door entrance back, into the house so to speak. It's essentially like walking in between two parts of the house without even being inside. This is all to say that my bedroom is on the first floor, right next to the external hallway that leads to the front door. If I stand up and look out the window next to my bed, I can actually see anyone standing at the front door, but they'd have their back to me. Hopefully that description makes sense. I developed a habit at a really young age of peeping out that window whenever a delivery person or a guest would ring the doorbell. It was like having a little hidden camera that I could use to check who was there before stepping in full view of the door. What I'm about to tell you happened just a few months ago, at the very beginning of the summer. My parents were out of town for the week, so I decided to take advantage of the situation and let my girlfriend Anna sleep over for a few days. Normally, my strict and traditional parents would be very opposed to anything like that, but what they didn't know wouldn't hurt them. Plus, they'd met Anna a million times, so it wasn't like I was bringing an unwelcome stranger into our home. The first night was relatively uneventful, just a chill movie night with some snacks and a few glasses of wine. We went to sleep at a reasonable hour and went for a dip in the pool the following morning. I'm not really much of a party person, and neither is Anna, so we were more than happy to just spend some time together relaxing, playing games, and watching TV. The second night was when things went down. It was probably sometime around midnight. We were pillow talking in the dark, about to go to sleep, when I heard something from outside. It sounded like a screeching, or something being dragged. I shushed Anna and listened, trying to figure out what I was hearing. It sounded like it was coming from the driveway, which is off to the side of the house. That alarmed me, mostly because it meant the sound was coming from really close to the actual house. I listened a little while longer, and realized it was the sound of one of my dad's trash cans being moved around. He sometimes keeps them in front of the garage, and I was pretty positive I had seen a couple of them out there earlier that day. My first thought was that he hadn't fully emptied them and some animal was poking around looking for scraps or food or something. Still though, animal or not, hearing things moving around in your driveway is creepy, especially when you're the only one home and it's too dark to see anything. I told Anna to stay put, telling her that I was going to go shoo away the raccoon or other animal that was rummaging through the trash. Then, I calmly walked out of my room and over to the front door. I flicked on the switch for the exterior lights, but they didn't illuminate the driveway enough for me to see anything, just the front yard and the porch. So, reluctantly, I opened the door and walked outside, hoping my presence would be enough to scare off whatever was out there. I stood on the porch for a few seconds, waiting to hear scampering or see an animal run across the yard, but nothing happened. In fact, even the sound of the trash can had stopped. I figured there was a slim chance that whatever had been there had already run away, but concluded it was unlikely since I had been watching and listening the whole time. So, even more reluctantly, I clicked on my phone flashlight and started walking down the front steps toward the driveway. As I got closer, I realized that one of the trash cans had indeed been messed with. Two of them were sitting against the garage door, but one of them was completely overturned, with its contents scattered across the driveway. I groaned, knowing I was going to have to clean up the mess. I should mention that I didn't see anything out there, even after approaching, so I figured the animal had slunked away without me noticing. Just to be completely sure, I shined my flashlight all around the trash cans, but there was still nothing there. So that confirmed it. Without much more thought, I started picking stuff up from the driveway and throwing it back in the trash can. After I finished with that, I went back inside, opened the garage door, moved the trash cans inside, and locked it. I didn't want to run the risk of something returning later and waking me up. Then I went back to bed. Anna was still awake, but barely. I could tell she was about to fall asleep, so I gave her a gentle kiss on the forehead and tried to get comfortable on my side of the bed without disturbing her too much. I was in that in-between phase of consciousness and unconsciousness, where you're half dreaming but can pull yourself out of it if you concentrate, and that's when I heard something. This gentle tapping noise, like metal on glass. I was convinced it was part of the half-dream I was having, but something about it was just the slightest bit too unsettling, so instead of succumbing to exhaustion and drifting off into sleep, I opened my eyes and looked around the room. Sure enough, the tapping sound didn't stop. I froze. It hadn't been in my own head. It was coming from somewhere in the room. I didn't move a muscle. I just listened, trying to pinpoint exactly where it was emanating from, or even what it was. After a few seconds, I realized it wasn't coming from inside the room at all, even though it sounded so clear. That could only mean one thing, though. It was coming from just outside my window. I forced myself out of bed, stood up slowly, and peeked behind the curtain of my bedroom window. In the minimal light from outside, I could see the outline of a person standing at the front door, with their back to me. It was terrifying. I looked for a little while longer, and realized they were lightly tapping on the glass over and over and over again, as if expecting someone to answer the door. But that was insane. It was past midnight, and none of the house lights were on. I tried to make out more details about the person, but I couldn't see anything distinctive without more light. As I was standing there watching them, I noticed them start to turn around. Without thinking, I ducked under the light just in time, and I felt my heart start racing. I must have stayed crouched behind the window for a full minute, terrified that they had seen me. I didn't want to look again, but I had to. With a deep breath, I mustered up the courage to take another look out the window. Slowly, I stood back up, peeled the curtain back, and instantly regretted it. There, just 2 inches from the glass, was a face staring back at me. I yelled and recoiled from the window, yanking the curtain shut again. Even though we were only face to face for a split second, I was able to make out that it was a man with shriveled-looking skin, like someone whose face was melting away. As I fell back onto the bed, still yelling uncontrollably, Anna woke up. I screamed that there was someone outside, then made sure my bedroom door was locked before grabbing my phone and calling the police. The cops showed up a little over 10 minutes later. Anna and I stayed locked in my room the entire time. I really wanted to run to the front door to see where the creep had gone, but Anna was clutching onto my arm and wouldn't let me. When the police finally arrived, I let them inside and told them everything I had seen. They did a quick sweep of the house, and with my help, we confirmed that there was no sign of forced entry, and the entire house was locked up. That put me at ease, but it still didn't explain why that guy was creeping around my house and where he had gone. Eventually, after walking the perimeter with their flashlights and poking around the yard, they told us they didn't find anything unusual. One of them told me to call back should I see that guy again. Then they left. The rest of the week passed without incident. I ended up telling my parents, who, to my surprise, didn't seem overly concerned about it. We don't exactly live in a sketchy neighborhood, so I was surprised that they were being so nonchalant about the whole thing. To be fair though, their reaction made me feel like I was overreacting a little bit. I mean, what had really happened? Some homeless guy had crept around our house? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was making a big deal out of nothing. But if that were the case, I probably wouldn't be writing this. The reason I'm writing this now is because for the past few nights, I've woken up randomly in the middle of the night to strange noises coming from outside my window. Not my trash cans moving around like what I had heard before, but different sounds. I told my dad about them, and he's actually planning on installing some security cameras around the perimeter of our house. But still, I can't help but feel like that guy showing up at my house wasn't a one-off thing. If anything else happens, I'll be sure to send a follow-up. What you're about to hear is an experience that nearly made me lose my mind. It's still something that I think about quite often, if I'm being honest, but I've been able to recover a bit in the months since it's happened. The whole story is pretty quick, so I'll get right into it. I'm a single guy in my mid-30s. I live alone with no pets in a small one-story house. The house is really modest. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room, kitchen, dining room, and a tiny garage. That's it. Life is fantastic. Because of my profession, I can work on my own time and don't have to answer to anyone, whether that be a girlfriend, a parent, or an employer. Freedom has always been an imperative part of my life, so I've done my best to maximize it wherever possible. I know a lot of people are different, and a lot of people might actually judge me for my quote, immature lifestyle, but everyone has different priorities and preferences, so as long as no one judges me, I won't judge them. The excess freedom is definitely tethered to its own set of drawbacks though. I've developed some bad habits that I'm sure some people would frown upon. One of them is my sleep schedule, which is god-awful. For some reason, I'm most productive at late hours of the night, so I often find myself staying up until dawn and sleeping into the afternoon. It's just how my body functions, and until I'm absolutely forced to, I don't see a reason to change anything. I was up really late one night. I'm talking past 3 a.m. late. I was sitting at my desk, getting some work done on my computer. I was in the zone, not even listening to music. Imagine yourself at peak hours. That's the kind of groove I was in. The room was dead silent, and I was alone with my thoughts, the sound of my keyboard, and my work. And then, bam, out of nowhere, the silence was interrupted by the sound of footsteps pounding down the hallway towards my bedroom, followed by 3 or 4 bangs on the bedroom door. Like deafening bangs, the type of bangs you'd expect the police trying to barge into a drug den would make. I shot up from my chair so fast I banged my knee on the desk and knocked my monitor over. I was just so shocked, it caught me completely off guard. Just imagine being in your own house at 3 a.m., alone, and complete silence just gets interrupted by banging on your door. It was, and still is, the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. Standing up was a pure reaction. I was completely frozen after that. I had my eyes fixated on the door, dreading the moment I knew was coming. The door bursting open and someone barging into my room. Me having to fight a complete stranger in pitch black darkness. But it never came. I didn't hear anything else, not even the sounds of footsteps retreating from the door. It was like I had imagined it, but I was 100% positive I hadn't. I don't know how long I stood there, but I physically could not force myself to move. It was like sleep paralysis, except I hadn't been dreaming. And then, finally, I heard the sounds of footsteps quickly walking back down the hall, so someone had been there. I don't know why, but hearing those footsteps again unlocked my brain. Without thinking, I grabbed an empty beer bottle off my desk, ran to the door, and started chasing after whoever had broken into my home. I didn't even try to be quiet. I screamed at the top of my lungs like a lunatic, hoping that would give me the extra adrenaline I needed. I ran through the entire house, screaming, but I never found anyone. My house isn't that big. There aren't many places someone could hide, but even after checking every room, there was no one there. All the doors and windows were locked too, which was even more confusing. My bout of confidence was completely drained after that, and I felt fear start flooding back in. I sprinted back to my room, locked the door, and called the police. In the time it took the police to arrive, I listened to my surroundings in complete silence, but never heard anything. When the police finally showed up, we searched the house together, but found nothing. One of the officers tried to convince me that whoever had been there had left, but I insisted that everything had been locked up. He told me I had probably overlooked something, and it took everything in me not to curse him out right there. I know for a fact that nothing had been unlocked, but that didn't explain how that person had gotten into and out of my house. Unless I had imagined it, but I know I didn't. For the next week, I was a psychological mess. My brain refused to accept that I had imagined something so vivid, but I couldn't conceive of a possible way that that person had gotten into and out of my house. I'm much better now, but there was a time where I had trouble sleeping, eating, working, everything. Even now, the only explanation I can think of is that I somehow didn't notice an unlocked window or door in my house. Still though, why anyone would crash through my house just to run away is a complete mystery to me.
This is a popular story with my family and most of my friends. Amanda is my brother's girlfriend. At the time of this story, she was looking for her first apartment and moving out of her parents' house. Her and my brother didn't want to move together since they'd only been dating for a few months. She opted instead to search for a roommate online. Browsing Craigslist, she found an ad titled something like, "Roommate Wanted, Females Only." This sort of thing was common since the area she was looking in was mostly young professionals. The listing was for a room in a house for about $225 a month, which was quite cheap compared to most of the other places listed. The occupant listed herself as a 23-year-old college student that wasn't comfortable with living with any males. The other roommate would have their own room and attached bathroom. So far, Amanda was into this place. However, the listing only had a single photo from outside the property. Amanda sent an email wanting to meet the occupant and tour the house. Within 30 minutes, she receives an email back with all the details and time to stop by. The girl worked late hours and wanted Amanda to stop by at 8 p.m. When Amanda arrives, there's a handwritten note on the front door saying, "Door broken, use back door." Walking around the house, it looks nice but slightly unkempt. Tall grass, weeds, dusty windows, etc. Still no alarms for Amanda though. When she knocks on the back door, an older man opens the door. At first, Amanda thinks that she has the wrong house, but the man reassures her and says that the occupant was out and that he was the landlord. The occupant asked him to meet Amanda since she was working late. He seemed pleasant and offered to show her around. Alarms start going off but aren't at red alert yet. First, the guy was clearly in his 40s, unshaven, and looked like he lived in his car. Also, only the kitchen light was on. As they walked around the house, Amanda noticed one huge red flag. No furniture. Nothing. The landlord was polite about answering questions, but seemed irritable to keeping the lights on for too long, rushing her around and only letting her look at rooms for a few moments. There was a single room that the landlord wouldn't open, telling her that it was the occupant's room and he didn't want to invade her privacy. As they walk down the hall into the living room, she notices the front door has a plank nailed across it. Quote unquote broken for sure. Amanda's creepometer is starting to ding, so she decides to wrap up the walkthrough and leave, but trying to be polite. As she's given the guy her "thanks for the showing" bit, he perks up and states that he forgot to show her the basement. He claims it's recently furnished and would be a great rec room, and she should take a look down there. At the time, Amanda and the landlord are standing in the small hallway between the front living room and the back kitchen. In this little hallway was the basement door. When he opens the door, it opens outward to create something of a barrier between Amanda and the back door. The basement is pitch black. He smiles, motions down the stairs, and says, "Ladies first." What happens next is nothing more than a stroke of luck. Amanda gets a text just as some random person parks in front of the house. Thinking on her feet, she pretends it's a phone call and answers her phone. "Hey, yeah, are you here? I'll come out from around back and let you in. It's great, you have to see it." With a motion of confidence, she excuses herself around the landlord and walks out of the back door. She says the guy just looked at her like he was confused. Once outside, she sprinted to her car and sped like hell out of there. When Amanda got home, she told her mother and my brother everything. Cops were called. They took her statement and went to investigate. The Craigslist post had been removed. The house had been foreclosed over 6 months earlier. It was found out that the house had been foreclosed over 6 months earlier and the property had been abandoned. When the police investigated, they found that the closed room that the so-called landlord didn't want her to look in was where the man had been staying. There was a pile of old dirty blankets, rotten food, and empty gallon jugs everywhere. More creepy was he had plastered ripped up pages from porno magazines on all the walls in the room. The really scary part of this was the basement. The man had tied a thin piece of fishing twine at about shin level across the stairs about halfway down. The basement was empty except another pile of old blankets, a broom handle wrapped in leather belts, and a small box with a few rolls of assorted tape. I was up late looking for goalie equipment on Craigslist some night in the summer. I was only 14 and had no job and therefore no money, so I had to find the cheapest deal possible. I didn't really care about the condition of anything. I came across an ad that seemed like a steal. The pictures showed the pads, blocker, glove, and stick. They were all in visibly good condition. It was only listed for $50. That seemed like an insane deal. I contacted the seller via text and he asked me a few questions, one of which was how old I am. I responded 14 and he told me he's glad to hear that I'm dedicated at a young age. It didn't really seem weird to me what he said at the time, but now that I look back on it, I should have been wiser. I asked the seller for his address, but he instead asked me what town I'm from and that he could just meet me somewhere walking distance from my house. I didn't know how I felt about this, but I really wanted that equipment. We agreed to meet in the parking lot of the mall, which is literally down the block from my house. I stood alone in the exact spot I described for a few minutes, until I heard somebody toot their horn. I noticed a white van parked away from all the other cars, and then I received a text saying that he was in the white van. I replied telling him to come out with the equipment, but he said it would be easier to do the transaction in the van. I had a really bad feeling about this and hightailed away from there. I ran down the block, and when I looked back, I saw the white van driving down the street behind me. Now there was someone in the passenger side as well. I didn't want to lead them to my house, so I cut into some random person's backyard and hopped over the fence. I was on the opposite side of the block now, hiding behind a bush. Within 20 seconds, the white van passed by and turned the next turn, vanishing from sight. It was safe to run back to my house now. My parents flipped shit on me when I told them about it. I didn't get the tag number or a good look at their faces, so all they could report was a suspicious white van. The Craigslist ad was taken down, so I couldn't show it to my parents. I thought it was over, but that night, I heard a vehicle engine running outside. I looked out my window down to the street and saw the white van sitting across the street, but as soon as I looked out the window, the van drove off down the road out of sight. I haven't seen it since. I don't know if they saw me or not, or if they somehow found my address. It makes me paranoid to this day. I was selling a dining room set on Craigslist. I listed it for $1,200, but put slightly negotiable in the title. It was a good-looking set, but I wasn't getting any offers. I did live in the country though, so not a lot of people lived in my town. I finally received a call about the set. The man on the other end of the phone had a very shaky voice, and he sounded a bit off, but I can't really explain how. He wanted to check out the set to make an offer, so I gave him my address, and he said he would be over within the hour. I dusted off all the furniture one more time to make it look as nice as possible. The doorbell rang within 10 minutes. I was shocked. He must have lived really close, which in my area was very surprising. I opened the door and immediately felt uncomfortable about letting this man into my house. He was wearing a white undershirt with yellow stains scattered all over it. His pants were way too baggy and had a few tears in them. His gray mustache stained brown in the middle, and his hair a complete mess. Basically everything you shouldn't look in public, he looked. Basically everything you shouldn't look in public, he looked. He greeted me with a hello in the same shaky voice as before. I invited him in and he immediately caught a glimpse of the dining room set, since the dining room is the first room you see in the house. He began walking around really slowly, making weird sounds and making sure to feel every inch of every piece of furniture. I was very weirded out watching this and decided to break the silence by bringing up the price. I reminded him that my asking price was $1,200, and then he stopped, looked up at me, and gave me the most unnerving smile I had ever seen. "How about $500? He asked me. I laughed a bit at the insane offer, almost thinking he was joking, but when his smile turned to an angry expression, I knew he wasn't. I apologized and told him that's much too low for me. The lowest I would be willing to go is $1,000. The man then started acting even weirder. He put his hands up to his head and started making strange noises again, pacing back and forth. He then looked at me with a look of anger and hatred. This man was not right in the head. I realized it just then and there, and I needed him out of my house. I apologized to him again and thanked him for coming, which was the most obvious way of me letting him know it was time for him to leave. But he didn't move. At this point, the stare he was giving me was obviously a stare of malice. This man was much bigger than me, and I didn't think I could take him in a fight. But then the man moved his hand to his back pocket, and I quickly assumed he was reaching for a gun. I ran upstairs to my bedroom to my closet, leaving the man alone in the dining room. In my closet, I grabbed my .45, loaded it, and took cover behind the wall, sneaking a peek into the dining room. The man was gone. I went back to my room and locked the door. I called the police and took cover behind my bed in the meantime. It felt like hours before I heard the police sirens outside my house. However, I stayed put behind my bed. For all I knew, that man was right outside my bedroom door. Thankfully, I hadn't locked the door, and I heard the police enter my house. I left the bedroom with my hands raised and showed them my ID. They had me wait outside while they continued their search. I sat there for probably 5 minutes before the 2 police officers stepped out of my house, with the man in handcuffs. They told me something disturbing. He was hiding in my pantry closet with a loaded gun. I feel it's only a miracle that the police weren't shot at, but the thing that still haunts me the most to this day was the look that man gave me through the window of the police car as it drove off. A look of malice and hatred, like the first thing he would plan to do after getting out of jail would be to come back for me. I'm still thinking about moving. I can't deal with the constant paranoia of that man coming back. All I can say that can be learned from this is to be very careful when giving your address to people from Craigslist.
This happened back at a magical, delicate age when I still believed in Santa Claus. It was Christmas Eve night, or technically Christmas at that point. the time, I have no idea. All I know is it was late and everyone in my house was probably asleep. I woke up randomly to what I don't know, but I was probably extremely thirsty. I had to get out of my bed and walk all the way downstairs to the kitchen to get a glass of water. There were night lights on in the living room and kitchen, so I didn't have to turn on any lights to see where I was going. Whenever I was thirsty when I was a little kid, I'd always decide to finish the glass in the kitchen instead of bring it up to my room. I don't know why, just one of those stupid things I did as a kid. As I was sipping the water, I heard noises come from down in the den, where we had our Christmas tree. It sounded like a big bag. I peered my head around the wall leading down the stairway to the den, but it was a little too dark to see who could be down there. I actually thought maybe it was my mom, so I started walking down the stairs, and the rustling of the bag stopped. I turned down the couch side lamp, and there I was, greeted with a massive man, both in height and size, wearing a red suit and hat and a familiar long white beard. It was Santa Claus. He waved me over, and I nervously but excitedly walked over to him. He patted my head and said he was just delivering my presents from his black bag. I looked at the bag, which seemed to be full of small boxes. I tried to get a peek in the bag, but he stopped me and said, No, don't do that. It's a surprise." I noticed there were already some presents under the tree. He turned me around and whispered in my ear I need to go back to bed. For some reason I didn't go. I just turned around and kept looking at Santa. Eventually he actually started walking me up the stairs, telling me we need to be quiet. He asked me which way my room was, and then he told me to go up the second flight of stairs. That was when I actually obeyed him. I looked down the stairs when I was at the top, and all I saw was the eerie figure of the Santa Claus looking up at me. I realized he turned off the nightlight as I was walking up the stairs. I went to my room and shut the door, excited that I just saw Santa. As I tried to fall back asleep, I heard a loud bang from downstairs in the den. The sound traveled all the way back up to my room. I assumed that was Santa leaving the house. The next morning, I woke up early to my mom's screams downstairs. I ran down to the den, where my mom and dad already were, to a disturbing and confusing scene for my young self. There were no presents under the tree, and the sliding window was broken. I don't mean the glass was shattered, I mean it was slammed shut so hard it got knocked off the sliding mechanism. I confusedly asked my parents what happened, and explained that I saw Santa last night. When I told them this, they frantically tried getting as much info out of me as possible. My dad called the police, and when I asked him about the story for fresh details before writing this, he said the 911 operator said on the line that 2 other calls for the same incident had come in that morning. Apparently a man dressed as Santa Claus was targeting certain houses with accessible windows, and he was stealing the gifts under their Christmas trees. I believe there's a special place in hell for that man. My parents had to tell me later that day that Santa isn't real, and that should anything like that ever happen again, not to trust it. I once worked as a night security guard for a brief, horrible part of my life. It was for many places, but for the longest time, a mall in Chicago, which I'll leave the name out so that the story can in no way get traced back to me. As the lone night security guard in a huge city mall, it was very relaxing and laid back. But of course, working graveyard hours was the worst, especially when I had to do it on Christmas Eve night. I did my regular pacing back and forth the wide halls of the mall, occasionally having a seat by the big center Christmas tree which would stay lit 24/7. After getting a coffee from the security lounge section, I stepped back into the hall and noticed all the way on the other side of the mall, a light was on in one of the stores. A light that wasn't on before, I swear it. No one was supposed to be in the mall besides me. I jogged over to the store and set my coffee down under a plant. It was a jewelry shop. I tried opening the door, but it was locked. So how could anyone be in there? The light in the store suddenly started flickering, so naturally I had to chalk it up as faulty wiring, false alarm. I knelt down to pick up my coffee again, and as I looked up, I saw someone's head behind the front counter of the store, just their head, like they were hiding. But it happened so fast. One moment there was light, the next darkness, and when the light flicked back on again, the head was gone. I literally rubbed my eyes and shook my head, wondering was I seeing things. I took my master keyring off my belt and fiddled for the key to the store. I didn't know where the light switch was, and to be honest, I was way too freaked out to check behind that counter with nothing but a flashlight. I shut the door and relocked it and walked back to my post by the Christmas tree. I started chugging my coffee because I really thought I was losing it after seeing what I saw. The lights in that store all the ways down on the other side of the hall were still off, but I heard a click and then a bang echoed down in my direction, followed by someone running across one side of the hall to the other, before disappearing in an intersecting exit hallway. I sprang up and almost spit out the remainder of my coffee. I ran down the hall till I came to the intersecting smaller hallway. This hallway, which led to one of the exits, had a bunch of massage chairs, coin-operated kiddie rides, and the public restrooms. I didn't see anywhere else that person could have gone besides the restroom, as the exit doors were all locked from both sides. I got to the door of the men's bathroom and stopped, once again faced with the fear of confronting whoever was in that mall with me. I cracked the door open just slightly, enough for me to start speaking into the bathroom, saying whoever's in here needs to get out before I call the cops. There was a crying and moaning type noise coming from inside the restroom. I opened the door fully and realized it was coming from one of the stalls. I repeated what I said at the door, but the crying sounds didn't stop. I knelt down in front of the stall to get a peek under, and I saw two black shoes facing the door, facing me. It seemed the person was just facing the stall door, making these crying noises. The crying stopped, and then the next thing I saw was the person on the other side of the stall quickly get on their knees and look under the door back at me. I recognized it as the same person from behind that counter in that store. I got back on my feet and left the bathroom to call the police and explain the situation. As a security guard, I never encountered anything like this overnight, and I did know how to deal with it. I definitely did not want to make it physical. A couple police officers came to the doors at the end of the hall, and I let them in. We all went to the men's bathroom again, and the stall door was still shut, and the man was still inside. For the longest time, the officers demanded he come out with his hands up. After a while of him refusing to listen, the male officer started kicking in the stall door until it broke open. The two officers apprehended the nutjob inside the stall. As they walked him out of the mall, though, the man had his head turned to look at me the entire time. I looked away. His dead eyes staring into my soul genuinely disturbed me. He looked like he wanted to kill me. Before he was put in the back of the police car, he said my name, and I immediately got the chills. The officers said they would find out who he is and everything, and they went on their way. My shift ended a few hours later, and for the remainder of my time working at that mall, I was always paranoid every time I'd turn a corner that he'd be standing there. Our parents had our youngest sibling much later than they had my brother and I. This happened last year when I was 18, my older brother was 24, and our youngest sibling Rachel was just 2. I was home from college for winter break. My older brother would be returning home from out of state in a few days, and my parents were on a couple's vacation. It was about a week before Christmas, and I was tasked with taking care of Rachel until my parents got back. My time watching Rachel consisted of a lot of sitting around the house, having friends over, and just watching TV and movies. I would let Rachel play in the living room with her toys as I'd watch TV with no lights on but the Christmas tree, which I always find to make watching TV a lot more relaxing. When Rachel started to get tired, I brought her up to her room, changed her, and put her in the crib upstairs. I made sure to turn on the baby monitor as my parents did every night just to make sure I could hear her if she got restless. Something to note, Rachel's room shares a bathroom with my mom and dad's room. So basically, both my parents' and Rachel's rooms are connected to a bathroom, which thus connects the 2 bedrooms in a sense. I went back downstairs to watch TV. I think I was watching The Grinch when sound started coming from the baby monitor. distorted, human-like noises. It didn't sound like Rachel, so I hurried back upstairs to Rachel's room. I burst in so quickly and aggressively that she immediately awoke and started crying. I looked around the room naturally. Then I picked Rachel up and started gently rocking her. But I realized this didn't help. She was probably too big for it. So I put her back down in the crib and started tickling her, then gently whispering her back to sleep. When she had her eyes closed again, I left the room. A few minutes later, I heard Rachel crying again through the baby monitor. I ran up to see what's wrong, and she was standing in her crib, pointing at the bathroom door, which was cracked open. I honestly didn't remember if it had been cracked open like that earlier or not. I went to check the bathroom, and it was clear. I told her calmly she's imagining things. I wasn't sure how much she understood of what I was saying, but after a few minutes in there with her, I got her to settle back down. Once again, I went down to the living room to continue watching TV. The orange light on the baby monitor once again started going off. I felt like I was in a horror movie scenario. I could distinctly hear a man's whispering coming from the baby monitor. I ran back up to that room faster than ever, burst through the door to Rachel's crying again. I went to pick her up to get her out of there. And when I turned for the door, I looked into the dark bathroom, which now had the door wide open. There was a man in my parents' room, and he started walking through the bathroom towards me and Rachel. I ran out of the house to the neighbor's house while holding Rachel. Our neighbor Judy let us in and let me use her phone to call the cops. They didn't find anyone, but Judy let us stay the night at her place regardless. The next morning, Judy went back to my house with me to look around as support. The house seemed clear. However, I couldn't help but look around the house to try and find out how he got in, but I just couldn't, and it made no sense. A couple weeks later, my mom sent me to the attic to put some of the Christmas decorations away, and you wouldn't believe what I found up there. In the corner of the attic was a bed of blankets and a pillow, hidden behind a bunch of ripped up boxes stacked up as a wall. I immediately associated it to that man in our house. We have no idea how long that man was actually in our house for.
I was on the deep web after hearing all the craze about it. I had to go on Reddit to get the really interesting links. Most of the links just took you to pages that would list hundreds of other pages. At first, it just seemed like an endless cycle of pointless pages, until I somehow landed on a very dark-themed website. I don't mean it was a horror-themed scary story website. I mean the banner had the disgusting and disturbing picture of what looked like a girl no older than 12, blindfolded with slits in her mouth and bruises all over her face. I never knew how dark the internet can get, but I knew right after seeing that picture, it can only get worse on that website. I could have and should have just closed the browser or clicked the back button then and there, but something possessed me to click through the forums on each and every forum post. They were all littered with gut-wrenching, brutal and sadistic pictures of children, from babies and toddlers all the way up to a 16-year-old girl, all being tortured. I don't even want to describe what I saw, but I want you to understand the true horrors that go on in the deep web, and in this world. One post was titled, "Followed 10-year-old home successfully, knocked out and brought back." I dared click on it, and saw pictures of an innocent 10-year-old boy who was originally on his way home from school, tied up to a chair attached to some kind of torture machine that looked as if it belonged in a Saw movie. I scrolled down, and the pictures got worse. The device on his chair started to carve into his wrist. I couldn't even finish that post. I had to click back. I found another shocking post with a link to a video of a newborn child being dipped into a pot of boiling water. I could only watch about 10 seconds before closing the video. I would describe more, but I don't want to share any more of it for your own sake. However, the worst part that still kills me knowing this is that I used to be a camp counselor for about 4 years, and I had dealt with many hundreds of kids. A few years back, there was the very upsetting news that one of the kids attending the camp, one of the kids in my group, had gone missing. That was many years ago, and everyone since has just given her up for dead. That was confirmed when I clicked on one certain post. There was the dead body of an 8-year-old girl, almost completely mutilated, but face still recognizable. I instantly recognized the face as the girl who had gone missing so long ago. I literally threw up because of the horror I was feeling. I called the police and told them I need the cops right away. They showed up quickly and I showed them the screen, and then a picture of the missing child. They gave their own signs of disgust before giving me a lecture about how I went about reporting this wrong, that I shouldn't have called the cops or whatever. But they still took down the URL and thanked me for finding this. It took much longer than I hoped for the website to finally come down, but I have no idea if they ever caught the sick fuck that did that, or anybody that posted anything on this forum for that matter. I caught my brother browsing some weird website one night. It had pictures of guns and illegal drugs. He and I are really close, so we don't usually hide things from each other, so when I questioned him, he straight up told me he was buying weed on a website called Mr. Nice Guy Market. I told him that's illegal and that he would obviously get caught. Then he went on about telling me that he's safe and anonymous on the deep web. I assured him that that's complete nonsense, that everything is traceable, but he told me he's already used it at least 10 times and that I can't stop him. So I gave up and watched him make his purchase. He found some new listing of cannabis called The Poison Queen. It had one review which rated it positively. I suggested to him that he find one with more ratings, but he started acting like some kind of pro, telling me to relax. The seller was from the same state as us, which would make for quick delivery, claimed my brother. He did his thing. He used some kind of weird program to encrypt his message to the seller, which included his name, our address, and other info. I reminded him it was a mistake, but he told me everything is fine. About a week later, my brother started getting concerned that he got scammed because there was never any word from the seller. Coincidentally, on that same night, we got a heavy knock at the door. I got nervous that it was the police and that they caught on to my brother's illegal drug purchase, but it turned out to be much worse than just the police. He opened the door, and we were greeted by some sketchy-looking guy with medium-length hair, all fuzzy and messy, a brown, messy beard, a fat belly, and a very obviously fake Rolex on his wrist. He then said my brother's name, and I saw my brother step back a bit. The guy asked my brother if he was the one who bought the weed. My brother didn't know how to answer. All I heard him mumble was, "I thought you would ship it." The guy then started motioning for us to come out to his van. I told my brother not to, but he went out anyway. I had to follow him to make sure nothing happened. I didn't feel right about this situation. About halfway to his van, I noticed something in the passenger circular window on the back. There was somebody with a ski mask on, barely making themselves visible as they peered out to us. I saw the guy leading us to the van notice him and begin to motion with his hand for the guy to get down. At that moment, I grabbed my little brother and dragged him all the way back in the house. I didn't realize until it was almost too late that the guy was chasing me. I was able to shut the door and lock it. They saw there were no cars in the driveway, so they must have assumed our parents weren't home. The guy started banging and kicking at the door, and by some stroke of luck, a larger man walking with his dog passed by and noticed what was going on. He questioned the guy at the door, which seemed to scare him off. We watched as the van drove down the road out of sight. I was so anxious to tell my dad, even if it meant ratting out my brother, that I ran to my dad's car when he got home to greet him. I then noticed the same van halfway down the block, parked by the entrance of the cul-de-sac down the road. Only for a moment though, before it drove off seconds after I noticed. I haven't actually seen it since, and it's been 3 whole months. I think this was a good lesson for my brother to stop messing around on the web. I was on tour trying to find some really deep websites. I was in a chat room where people normally shared links to deeper websites and weird pictures and videos, commonly illegal pornography. Some guy named Vintage XXX posted a link without describing what it was. I clicked on it and it took me to a black screen where a big video box eventually popped up with a play button. The video thumbnail was a dark room only lit by a TV screen. Out of curiosity, I clicked play and began to hear the sound of TV static in the background as lines of static slowly swam down the video screen. There was no seek bar on this video. Then I noticed something slowly begin to emerge from behind the wall. It was a figure dressed in all black with some kind of black mask on as well. I started to suspect it was a jump scare video, and I thought I was right when the figure leaped out and ran to the screen in less than a second. It still got me even though I was expecting it, but then it got strange. The person had their face in front of the screen, slowly moving around as if he could see me and was observing me. Then I heard a crackly, demonic voice say something. It came from the video. It repeated itself, and I could make the phrase out to be, "Ask me something." I was really confused. I tried typing something, but there was nowhere to enter text. Then he said, "No, not the keyboard. Say something." I felt my heart punch the inside of my chest as he said this. I opened my mouth and mumbled the words, "You can hear me?" It responded with, "Yes." I was uncomfortable now. I thought it was a video. I pressed pause, but it didn't do anything. He said, "Don't try to leave, I want to talk." I tried moving the mouse to the exit button, but the mouse was frozen. In fact, none of the keys were responding on my keyboard. There was a long moment of silence before my webcam began flashing as if it were on, and my face popped up on the screen. "There, I got a picture of you now. Now just hang on while I get your address, and then we can meet." I started to panic, smashing every key on the keyboard, spazzing the mouse, but it did nothing. I had my finger on the power button, but it also didn't do anything. The computer wouldn't turn off. The voice was saying crazy things like, "You're stuck here. I will find you. Don't even bother." I snatched the screwdriver sitting on my desk, unscrewed the 4 screws on the bottom of my laptop, and took out the battery. The computer finally turned off. I was gasping for air as if I just ran a marathon. My heart was pounding 5 times as fast as it should have. I have since left my laptop off after that, and have resorted to using my desktop as my main computer. I'm sure by now nothing will happen. He definitely didn't have enough time to get my address.
One day like any other, I was sitting in my room doing whatever when I got a notification from Instagram that I got a new follower. It seemed to be one of those random spam-like accounts. The username was Ty13053, and there were 5 pictures on the profile, all of different typical suburban houses. The profile had 2 followers, was following 3 people including me, and none of the pictures had any likes. Comments seemed to be disabled on all of the pictures. I didn't bother blocking or removing the account from my followers, as I had my profile set to public anyway at the time. A couple nights later, I got a notification that the random Ty13053 account liked my most recent picture. Just being curious, I click on the notification and then pull up the profile again. This time there was a new picture on the profile, and I instantly recognized it as a picture of my house. I DM'd the profile asking who it was, saying it was very funny. Of course, it had to be one of my friends messing with me. When the person running the account left my DMs on scene and didn't reply, I followed up with, "This is harassment and a threat," and that I would have the police follow up on this. I ran to my parents' room to wake them up, as it was past 12 at that point. I showed them the picture of our house and said someone was messing with me who knew where we lived. They tried to rationalize and said the same thing I thought, that it was someone from my school messing with me. My dad and I both went outside regardless to have a look around the property and on the street. It was a ghost town out there though, as it should be past 12 o'clock. We went back inside into our respective bedrooms. I wasn't actually going to pursue it with the police at that exact moment. It was obvious to me, at least in the moment, that someone who knew me was pranking me. I stayed up for a few more hours, and around the time I was about to go to bed, I got a DM from the account. It was an image, another image of my house. It was on the side this time. As I had the chat opened, he sent another, this time a picture of my window, with the glare from the TV in my room visible in the picture. I didn't dare get up and look out the window. Wouldn't you guess it, the next DM from the account was, "Look out your window." I turned off the TV to allow total darkness in the room. I didn't want to be seen by whoever was at my window. I quietly crawled off my bed onto the floor in the dark. As I was crawling on the carpet towards the door, a pounding on the window started. I don't want to say knocking, because these bangs on the glass sounded loud enough to shatter it. Inevitably, I turned, and of course, saw a person at the window. Facial features, though, impossible to make out. I got up and ran out of my room and to my parents' room once again. I pulled my dad out of the bed and led him to my room. He heard the end of the bangs on my window, but by the time we got to my room, the guy at the window was gone. The banging was all my dad needed to believe me and take this seriously, though. We called the cops that second and talked to the officers who came. They said the good news was since the person was contacting me through Instagram, they could track the person after putting a legal request into Instagram. So that same night, we followed the cop car to the nearest precinct, where we went through this long process. They took the account name and my details of the story, and literally the next day, we found out who it was. It was this kid named Luke who went to my high school. As much as I want to give the last name, that could lead to issues. Luke was a very, very weird kid that didn't talk to many people. He was just a very mean, unpleasant, and scary dude. Not scary like tough, scary like some would even fear he'd do something crazy that would harm students or staff. I don't know why he targeted me. I never even spoke to the kid. But this really proved how dangerous he was. He hit my window so hard we found small cracks on it in the daylight. He was arrested and we got him for a harassment charge, an attempted breaking and entering charge, and I think a couple others. One day in calculus class, my friend Joe and I were goofing off in the corner when someone on Instagram requested to follow me. It was some blonde girl named Tracy. I accepted her follow request and showed Joe, because based on her picture, she was pretty hot. Of course, I felt pretty good having what I assumed to be some random good-looking girl following me. I requested to follow her back, and then I put my phone down to take notes in class. It wasn't until I got home that I got a DM from the girl. I don't really want to relay our whole conversation. I'll just tell you it started with her calling me very attractive, asking some basic questions about me, etc. I told her to accept my follow request, but she said she didn't want her boyfriend to see any new followers because he checks that all the time. That's when it got exciting for me, having a girl show interest in me while she has a boyfriend. It might have been wrong of me, but I kept entertaining it. She said they kept fighting and she just needed a short break from hanging with him, that she wanted to hang out with someone else to detox. I texted my friend Joe asking his advice, and he said I should 100% go meet up with her. Just needed that justification from a buddy, of course. We made plans to meet up by the little Bayside beach in town at 11 p.m. The Bayside beach in town was the go-to spot for my friend group to hang out or just bring girls on little dates. I pulled up to the nearby parking lot around 10:50 and DM'd her that I was there 5 minutes later. She answered right away, saying, "Great, I left something in the sand for you." Odd. I said, "LOL, what?" She said, "Go look." It was bizarre that we were still DMing on Instagram at this point, but I went along with it. I walked over to the little quiet beach, and I saw something in the sand by the water. It was a little cardboard box. I went to open it, and it was a Polaroid picture of my car, parked in that little parking lot from just now. What the hell? I DM'd her, LOL, where are you? She replied, come find me. Okay, so she's messing with me or trying to be cute. I could tell based on the picture that she had taken it while hidden in the bush patch surrounding the perimeter of the parking lot. I referred to the picture to get the angle of where the picture was taken right. I walked up to that general area in front of the bushes and stopped. I heard this really weird sound, like the sound you would make if you were trying to gargle but with no water in your mouth. Tracy? I said. I parted the bush to try and expose her. Instead, I saw some man hunched over on the dirt below the bush, his back to me. His head shot back at me so suddenly that I fell backwards on my palms, landing on the concrete. I ran to my car and drove out from there. I had to tell Joe and the rest of my friends what happened, and while they still used that beach as a hangout spot, I had to stop going there for a while for my own good. I'm 17 years old. My name is Jackie. Like most girls, I envy the gorgeous ones on Instagram. I like getting lots of likes and comments on my pictures. So last summer, I was taking advantage of the beach weather and posting a lot of swimsuit photos. Those are always a hit and get lots of attention. I usually let anyone follow me, as I like seeing my follower count grow. One day in the summer, I got one strange follow request though. I clicked on the username. It was completely blank. No profile picture, no posts, no followers, nothing. In fact, I'd be the only account it would be following once I hit accept. But I didn't care. Maybe it was one of my crazy exes trying to stalk me. Let them look, I figured. A week later, it began, and I received my first comment from the strange account. The comment said hot on one of my week-old pictures. I didn't think much of it, being as more than half the time I received comments on photos, they were from people I didn't actually know in real life. The next day, though, the account went on a liking spree on my profile. He liked nearly half of all my pictures. Then things got worse. One night I got a call on my cell phone. Curiously, I picked up and heard in a deep voice, "Hey," on the other end. It was a guy's voice, very, very deep, and I didn't recognize the voice at all. The voice on the other end said, "This is Jackie, right?" I hung up the phone with my heart now racing. I shut the blinds on both my windows. I had no idea who it was, but I just hoped someone was playing a prank on me. The next day, the account tagged me in a picture. I looked to see what the picture was, and it was a picture of the street around my block. I blocked the account and stopped using Instagram for a few days. One day that week, my friend Jess and I went to the beach. When we parked and were unloading the trunk with our beach chairs, some guy in jeans and sunglasses came up to me and complimented my swimsuit. I thanked him while not wanting to talk to this guy at all. He asked Jess and I how our day was going, and that's when I recognized his voice. He was the one on the phone who called me. He found me, and he followed me. I told Jess to get back in the car, and we drove home making sure he wasn't following us. I explained to her on the way back what was going on. I didn't want to leave my car in the parking lot of the beach, scared that he would bug my car or something. I also had my dad check for any trackers on the car when we got home. I'm not sure how he found me, but I think he was wise to the fact that I knew it was him. However, just a few days ago, I received a DM on Instagram from some random account saying, "Remember that time we met at the beach?" I'm hoping the harassment doesn't start again. I haven't been sleeping these past few nights. I may have to contact the police.
I used to play basketball back in high school. I was never really too good or anything. I just played so I could say I played a sport and to put something on my college resume. This one particular game, we were playing some nearby school, I can't remember the name of it, but we were home. This wasn't a very important game, so not a lot of people were watching the bleachers. I think we were down like 22-13 when some kid on the other team started trash talking me and a few of my teammates, but mostly me, making fun of my size and my hair. It got to the point where after every shot I missed, the kid would throw some wise-ass comment my way. Eventually I couldn't take it anymore and I shoved the kid as hard as I could. He fell on his back, sliding off the court. My teammates held his teammates back from attacking me as the ref blew his whistle and ejected me from the game. I didn't care, it felt way too good to feel bad about it. I walked right past my coach, not even batting an eye, and went straight for the locker room. The door was locked for some reason. I didn't want to have to awkwardly ask my coach to go unlock it, so I went outside and went around to the other side of the boys' locker room where there was an outside entrance. Strangely, that one was open. That door was never left open. As I stepped into the locker room, I realized it was as cold in there as it was outside. The door must have been open all game. The lights also weren't on, and I didn't have my phone on me, so I couldn't use the flashlight or anything. I shut the back entrance door and began feeling around the walls like a blind person, looking for the light switch. Over the sound of my skin rubbing against the brick wall, I heard a locker click. The sound of one of the lockers closing. I confidently called out, "Who's there?" assuming it was one of my teammates. No reply. It was dark in there, but not the kind of dark where you can't see anything. I began a slow walk down past the aisles, scanning each one for anybody who could have made that sound. And all the while I heard footsteps in the room, so I knew I wasn't alone. I got to the last aisle and saw for a mere second at the opposite side of the aisle someone really big moving behind the lockers as if they were hiding. I felt my heart skip a beat and was officially freaked out. So I decided to just leave and wait for the game to end to get my stuff. I made my way to the main entrance and tried to pull the door open, but it was locked from the inside too. I found the light switch right next to the door though, and the return of light made me feel a little better. With the light on, I gained the confidence to just confront whoever was in the locker room. Again, I started doing laps around the locker aisles, but I didn't see anyone. However, I still heard the footsteps opposite me wherever I went. If I was in one aisle, I heard the footsteps exactly opposite me in the next aisle over. I continuously called out, "Who's there?" I never even got so much as a cough in response. I became almost out of breath walking and running around the aisles so much. I then looked at the lockers and realized that in between them were tiny holes in which you could see over to the next aisle. I had an idea. I could peek through one of those holes and see who was on the other side. And so I quietly got on my knees and put my eye up to one of the holes. At first, all I thought I saw on the other side was darkness, as if something were blocking it. But I quickly realized what it was. What I was looking at through that hole was an eye. I ran out that back door quicker than I'd ever run in any of my games. When I went up to my coach, who understandably looked annoyed at me, I told him there was someone in the locker room. At first he assumed it was just the janitor, but after I convinced him it wasn't, he looked at me with a look on his face that told me he believed me. After the next call, he told the refs to pause the game, that there might be an intruder in the locker room. Half of my team and the coach went in to investigate, but by that time whoever was in there was gone. I didn't feel stupid or anything, as everyone seemed to believe me. I mean, the room was freezing and the back door was still open, for crying out loud. What we did find out at the end of the game, however, was that 4 of my teammates were missing their clothes from their lockers. All of them from the freshman locker aisle. I think I figured out what kind of person I was in that locker room with, and I'm just happy I never caught him. My brother's a hockey player, but he's only 13 years old, so I have to drive him to his games and practices a lot. His team always plays in an outdoor rink, so it usually gets really cold out. A couple weeks ago, I took my brother to his game, and since I usually get bored when I stay at his games, I took my girlfriend Michelle to watch with me. My brother's team was down like 4-0 by the end of the first period, and we really weren't enjoying it anymore, so me and Michelle decided to go to a more private location, not for anything sexual, just to smoke the stuff we brought with us. She's not a big smoker, but I'm usually able to convince her to light up with me. The park that this rink is in is very foresty. About half of it is nothing but dense forest. Locals call it the Burning Woods for obvious reasons. Me and Michelle found a good spot behind a few big trees, and a few moments later, after lighting the bowl, we heard footsteps approaching us. I put the lighter and pipe away quicker than I even had time to think about it. We heard a chuckle as two guys lower to mid-20s came into light. One of them had a painfully cliched mohawk with a green stripe and black fuzzy hair beneath. The other a big bald guy with a goatee. The guy with the mohawk laughed and said, "It's cool, don't worry about it. You got enough for 2 more?" My first instinct was to say, "Piss off, I'm spending time with my girlfriend." But for some reason, the words that came out were, "Yeah, I think so." I'm a serious coward. I always think of appropriate things to say in my head, but I never gather the courage to actually say it. After I said yeah, he told me he was just kidding, but that he had some super dope Durban poison or something in his car if we were interested. I looked at Michelle, who shrugged her shoulders, but I knew deep down she didn't want to go with them, just like I didn't. I then looked in the direction of the hockey game. I told them, "Nah, it's okay, we were just finishing up anyway." The guy just nodded his head and said, "Oh." He stuck out his hand for a goodbye high five / handshake, and I shook his hand. I directed Michelle back in the direction of the hockey rink. We both agreed that those guys were weird. We stopped when we thought they were far away. It's not like there wasn't any point in not smoking just because of that encounter. I gave Michelle the pipe and lighter, and as she flicked it, I could swear I heard footsteps moving through the leaves again. I did a quick side glance about 2 o'clock, and I knew he was there. The guy with the green mohawk. He was standing behind a tree with his head just kind of peering out from it. I did that thing with my eyes, looking over in that direction to kind of hint at it to Michelle. I didn't want to confront the guy, because at this point I knew something was wrong with these guys. And as I was already having no part of this, we both heard a stick snap from right behind the tree we were standing by. I pulled Michelle with me as we walked back closer to the hockey rink and back into the lights. At this point I lost interest in smoking. I just wanted to go back to the safety of the bleachers. We made it past the tree line and back onto the path when we heard one of the guys call out, "Hey, come back." We turned around, and there they were. The 2 guys standing by the edge of the tree line, maybe 20 feet away from us, with haunting smiles on their faces. And then I looked past them and saw a 3rd guy behind them, half covered by a tree. "No, it's okay guys, thanks," I yelled back.
It wasn't a request.
Those words hit me like a bullet. I dared not turn around. I simply nudged Michelle forward even faster to the bleachers that were now only about 50 feet away. I feared if I turned around I'd see a gun or something in his hands. We made it back safely to the bleachers with the feeling of comfort being around other people. The game ended and my brother's team lost 9-5. My brother stayed after a bit to speak with his coach, who was offering him a position on his other team, and by the time he was done, just about everyone had already left. With 3 cars in the parking lot, we all got into my truck and went home. But on the way out of the parking lot, I noticed immediately that the car behind us was tailgating and then shortly after started honking. I knew it was them. It had to be. They must have waited for us in their car. Why were they targeting us specifically? We didn't do anything. By a lucky break though, we didn't even have to drive all the way down the street. Parked on the corner of a side road, seemingly waiting to give tickets to unsuspecting drivers, was a Ford Explorer police car. We pulled up next to it and the car behind us kept driving past. The cop rolled down his window and we pointed at the car, telling him that those guys were harassing us. All the cop did was nod his head and say okay before rolling up his window. I took that as our cue to drive away, but I drove slowly hoping to see his car turn on along with his lights. They didn't. For whatever reason, he didn't care to chase them down. 2 weeks later, it still bothers me every day, and this whole situation still scares me every day. All my life, I'll never forget this experience. I've always had a close group of friends who I could relate to and that we all loved baseball. 6 of us were on the same team in a league, while all 8 of us consistently played pickup baseball with each other. We lived in the country, and there was this really low-key, convenient little clearing in the woods which had a baseball field and a basketball court. I shit you not, it was almost like our own little private park. Nobody else was ever there. Mostly because nobody knew about it. It was off some dead-end dirt road with nothing on it, and it was surrounded by nothing but forest. We were all 11 or 12 years old at the time, and living in the country you tend to have parents who are a little more lenient with letting you out unsupervised. At least that's how it was for us. This field was about a quarter-mile away from my house, so I always walked with my baseball bag containing my bat, glove, and a few extra balls. This was the day that ruined it for our whole group in this park. It was a Friday night, middle of July, so the sky was turning that deep orange as the sun was setting. That meant our game had to be wrapping up soon. I was coincidentally up at bat when 2 of my friends who were out at field pointed to something. We all turned and saw a huge group of men entering the little clearing and sitting down on a nearby bench. There were 6 men. I guess thinking back now, I'd say they were in their 20s or 30s at the time. I wouldn't say that they had a gang-like appearance, but they sure didn't look like guys you'd want to run into in a dark alley. The disturbing part was that they all either sat or stood there just watching our group playing baseball, and I could see and hear them laughing and making a lot of noise. We all looked at each other and kind of mutually agreed to pack up, since it was getting late anyway. As we all started putting our stuff in our bags, they all started calling out, "Aw, don't leave." As we all high-fived each other saying our goodbyes, we looked back at the bench, and we got scared when we saw all 6 men were now standing up, still watching us. You may think this sounds dumb, how a group of 8 kids would get scared because some people entered a park, but you don't understand the way they were intently staring at us. Now here was the bad part. I usually tended to walk alone since my house was in a different direction of everyone else. I asked my friend Jordan to kind of escort me out of the clearing and to the dirt path that I walked on just so it wouldn't be so obvious that I'm walking alone. Then I gave him a high five and we went our separate ways. It was getting really dark now, in the woods especially. That's why I always kept a flashlight in my baseball bag. Every click and every snap in the woods made me shine my light over in paranoia. My heart was actually racing. I just wanted to get home safely and get to my nice warm bed. Each step in the dirt seemed to become louder and louder as I became more sensitive to the sounds around me. I felt sweat dripping down my cheek as I heard laughter and screaming in the near distance, not of my friends but of grown men. I picked up the pace, thus causing a few of the spare baseballs to fall out of my bag, which I had apparently forgotten to zip up. I sighed an annoyed breath, dropped the bag, and hurriedly looked for the balls with my flashlight. The subsequent snapping of leaves and twigs from behind me made my heart drop. I turned and shined my light to reveal a tall man in a black hooded sweatshirt with the hood covering his face, inching his way closer to me. Only after I revealed him in the light, he wasn't inching anymore. He was full on running toward me. I felt life almost escape me as I ran for my life, dropping the flashlight and leaving all my baseball gear behind. I could hear my chaser behind me all the way until I saw the light from my house. I screamed for my mom and dad, and that's when I heard my chaser turn around. My mom and dad were hysterical in reaction to what I told them, and called all 7 of my friends' parents asking if their kids were alright and explaining the situation. Thankfully, all of my friends made it home okay that night. though my friend Jordan was actually followed briefly as well. He told me he wasn't chased after he started running though. After this incident, all of our parents stopped allowing us to go to that field. We still live in the same house, and it still makes me a bit uncomfortable knowing that one of those men, therefore all of them, know where I live.
This first photo that you're about to see in a few moments was taken by a viewer named Jane. Jane had met a man named Jeremy off a dating app. She hadn't been on any dating apps since her at the time recent breakup, and she thought it was finally fine to get back into the dating scene. After swiping away on some dating app and conversing with a few people, she matched Jeremy, who seemed to be the kind of guy she would feel comfortable with and connect with. Jane describes herself as a good-looking but shy and reserved girl, and she described Jeremy as an above-average looking guy with a buzz cut who was exactly her type. He had a full tattoo sleeve on his left arm and had mostly pictures of himself outdoors. Most notably, his first picture was of him leaning on his pickup truck with his dog in the bed of the truck and the woods in the background. The two struck up a conversation about his dog and then dogs in general, and eventually the conversation segued to local bars that the two would frequent. Jeremy picked up Jane, and the two ended up going to a bar called Lansdowne Street, and in her words, kind of hitting it off. Jeremy dropped off Jane at home, but beforehand he seemed a bit reluctant, wanting their little date to continue, even at one point implying that she should go back to his place with him. She politely rejected him, and that was the end of their first date. The two would text back and forth the next few days, and saw each other again the following Friday, where they went out to get fast food and ice cream. After chatting in Jeremy's car driving around for a bit, he ended up taking them to his house, where he started trying to get her to come into his house. She rejected this request over and over until it got creepy, and then he started getting a bit physical. Jane said she didn't know if he was trying to physically remove her from the car or if it was him trying to make some kind of physical advance on her. Either way, she shoved his arms off of her and left the car, walking quickly down the street. Jeremy called her a few times, but she ignored him and kept walking. She had her older brother Chris come pick her up. Shockingly, after a long back and forth over text, Jeremy cursed Jane out, but then minutes later switched his tone to apologetic and regretful. Jane blocked his number, figuring he was not what he initially seemed and he might be crazy. Now this is when the photo that I mentioned earlier comes into play. That night, Jane was awoken to a sound outside her window. It was the sound of the recycling bin full of glass and cans on the side of the house being kicked. It was late at night, so this was cause for alarm. She got out of the bed to look out her bedroom window. Upon lifting up the blind and looking around outside for just a second, she saw something that made her stomach churn. In this picture that she took, you see Jeremy standing in the darkness with his hood over his head, facing the window. She managed to not scream and be brave enough to take this picture when she saw him out there. Jeremy tried opening the window when he was seen and started yelling Jane's name repeatedly. Jane screamed for her brothers and her dad to help, and by this point Jeremy had taken off. According to Jane, the whole block had to hear his 8-cylinder pickup truck flooring it down the street. Tempted to text Jeremy threats of calling the police, she showed restraint and brought the info to the police the next day and filed for a restraining order using the text and pictures as proof of reason. She sent a photo of the restraining order to Jeremy, which went unresponded to because she never unblocked him. What Jeremy planned to do at Jane's window is not exactly clear, but even if it wasn't to break in and he wanted to talk to her, that wouldn't be okay either. And after the toxic messages he sent her, nobody would assume he's a completely level-headed individual. In fact, those messages, mixed with his sneaking around her house in late hours of the night and coming to her window after being blocked, suggest he might have been a dangerous individual. What you're looking at right now is one of the many dolls made by Anatoly Moskvin, a Russian former journalist and college professor with expert knowledge of cemeteries. As a child, Anatoly began wandering through cemeteries with friends for fun, and as time went on, he developed a fascination for the dead. Decades later, this fascination led to a hobby of collecting dolls. But this hobby hid a macabre obsession that drew upon his particular interests, digging up the dead and making dolls out of their corpses. Yes, the doll you're looking at is actually made out of a dead body. After making his human dolls, he kept them in his home as his companions and possibly lovers, evident by some of the stuff he wrote about his dolls. For example, "I kissed her once, then again, then again." But the really disturbing part of this is that the dolls were in majority made from little girls aged 3 to 12, and he would apply lipstick and makeup to many of their faces. He even marked the birthday of each of his dead victims in his bedroom. His self-proclaimed expertise on cemeteries wasn't a lie, as he was able to desecrate countless graves in his hometown while evading police for years until he was finally caught after the increasing suspicion at the growing number of defiled graves in the area. When police searched his home, they found 26 life-size dolls, or rather mummified corpses, scattered throughout the house. But the police didn't know they were corpses at first, until he openly admitted to it. His parents, who lived in the same flat as him, claimed to know nothing of his activities. His parents and others who had seen the dolls stated that they did not suspect that there were dead bodies inside, but then again, who would? Not even the police suspected the dolls to be bodies at first. His parents said they thought it was just his hobby to make such big dolls and did not see anything wrong with it. During a hearing in which he sought to be released from a psychiatric hospital to care for his elderly mother and live with a new girlfriend, he refused to apologize to his victim's parents. In his mind, he thought he was doing something good, as he stated he felt great sympathy for the dead children and thought that they could be brought back to life by either science or black magic. He even went as far as to shun the parents for leaving their daughters in the cold, whereas he took them into the warmth to be reborn. Anatoly dried the corpses using a combination of salt and baking soda, and then stored the bodies in secure, dry places in and around cemeteries. Once the bodies dried, he carried them to his home, where he used various methods to make the dolls, in an attempt to give the children functional bodies to be used when he eventually discovered a way to bring them back to life, feeling that their physical remains were too decayed and ugly for them to feel comfortable or happy. While some of the parents want Anatoly locked away behind bars for life, it was determined that he suffered a form of paranoid schizophrenia and has since been held in a psychiatric hospital. From his perspective, he may have thought he was saving a bunch of young girls, but from any other perspective, it was a horrific, downright disturbing thing to do. The picture you're looking at right now is of Amy Reeves and her baby sister. The backstory behind this picture isn't as cute and wholesome as one would imagine. On this day, Amy was taking her sister out trick-or-treating for Halloween. Amy lives in the backwoods of Texas. She moved from Houston to a small town closer to Galveston, as she described to be about an hour drive towards the southeast coast. Amy's move from the big city to a very small town was much needed for her, as she was sick of the city life, and settling into a very small home with 2 acres was a nice change of scenery for her. However, she kept noticing something completely eerie from the moment she moved into the house. It had nothing to do with the property or the home, but rather something outside the home. She kept noticing every time she would pull out of her driveway, a car would follow her and go the exact route she was going. She would ignore it and move on with her day at first, but it kept happening every single time that she would leave her house. In one of the neighboring houses, the same vehicle would pull out of their driveway whenever she would pull out of hers. She very soon started to suspect that there were some ill intentions there. However, for a while, she kept ignoring it and still moved on with her day, hoping it would stop eventually. When she was returning home from work one day, something in her gut told her to take a different route home, so she listened to her gut and took a different route. Instead of taking the highway, she took the service road towards the entrance of her little neighborhood. Instead of driving straight through the neighborhood to take a left, she took a slightly sharp right at the entrance and took a 3-minute longer route back home. But even on this detour, she eventually spotted the same vehicle in her rearview mirror. As she started to speed away to try to escape the car, it started flashing her aggressively. Eventually she makes a left turn and the car doesn't seem to follow. She proceeded home, and just as she thought she was safe and the stalker wasn't around, she realized she was wrong. The stalker's car with the brights still on was approaching, the lights becoming brighter as it got closer. By now it was clear the stalker had been following her home, even down her new route. The man pulled into his driveway and just sat there while Amy went into the house. While inside, she looked through the window out at the car, and the man must have taken notice because he started revving his engine. By this point, it was clearly a full-fledged stalker harassment situation, so Amy called the police in hopes to have them go and talk to him for her. When police arrived, she explained the whole situation the best she could, noting multiple times that she just moved in and she doesn't know the man. The police went over to the man's house to talk with him. Meanwhile, Amy went to her restroom, but she was yet to be under the realization that she had left the back door unlocked when she went outside to smoke a cigarette not too long ago. While she was in the bathroom, she heard footsteps walking towards her bedroom. She got up to shut and lock the bathroom door instantly, exposing where she was to the intruder. And seconds later, there was a knock on the wall separating the bathroom and her bedroom. Even though it was fairly obvious her cover was already blown, she remained as quiet as she could. The thought that maybe it could have been one of the police officers came up in Amy's head, but after one look out the bathroom window, that idea was out the window. Outside, she could see a police officer struggling with what appeared to be damp wood from the half-rotted shed beside the stalker's house. Amy pulled up her pants, getting ready to run to the front door. And that's when she heard it again, an aggressive knock on the other side of the wall from her bedroom. The stalker was inside her bedroom, no doubt. With not many other options other than being a sitting duck, Amy opened the bathroom door and bolted for the front door and outside to try and find an officer. But there were none in sight, not even the one that was struggling with the rotted wood moments earlier, just their empty squad car. After running around looking for the officers, she returned closer to her house where there was a commotion heard from inside, and it sounded as though there was a struggle between an officer and somebody else. Amy re-entered her house to see one of the officers on her bedroom floor in a lot of pain, who looked to be struggling holding his neck, not bleeding, but bruising as if the man punched him in the throat repeatedly or strangled him. The officer never told Amy exactly what happened because his partner called an ambulance for him. But Amy was notified later that same day that the man who was stalking her was taken into custody for assaulting and fleeing from an officer. Amy never learned why the cop's partner was struggling with the wood outside, or how exactly the one officer knew to check the inside of her house. In all likelihood, by the time the police had arrived, the stalker had already let himself into her house. And when the police didn't get an answer at the stalker's house, one of them returned to Amy's house to find the door ajar, and the rest you could figure out. The picture you saw minutes earlier of Amy and her baby sister was sent to her phone only days after moving in, and it was taken by a passing car without her even knowing it. After this entire stalker incident, it became much clearer who took the picture, though Amy still doesn't know how exactly they could have gotten her phone number. It was sometime in April, peak corona time in my state. Quarantining and lockdown were still in effect. There was nothing to do on Friday and Saturday nights besides Zoom calls with your friends. It was like a week after I finally hopped on the wave and agreed to jump on a Zoom call with my 4 friends, Ashley, Haley, Sylvia, and Alexa. It was a Friday night, and it was supposed to be our little Zoom drinking party. We were going to be playing drinking games and just staying up until the early hours of the morning. Ashley shared the link to join the Zoom call in our iMessage group chat. We joined one at a time, first Ashley, then me, then Haley and Sylvia. It seemed they were all on their laptops. I was the only one on my phone, so I switched to my laptop as well. It took a little while for Alexa to finally join, but when she joined, her screen was black. We all joked around, chanting Alexa's name and whatever, asking her what's up with her webcam. She started typing into the text chat of the Zoom call saying she didn't know what was wrong with her webcam and microphone, that it said both were offline. We continued to joke around about it, but also tried helping her, though we didn't really know how to be of much assistance with that. Eventually she typed in the chat, "BRB, I'm gonna go try to figure this out." So we all went on to our drinking and just chatting on our video chat, while we figured Alexa was doing whatever to try to fix her computer. But something randomly happened sometime into our call. Something completely unexpected that kind of scarred all of us. Alexa's cam suddenly started working, and her box went from black to showing an old creepy man doing something I really don't want to repeat. When he noticed the camera turned on, he jumped to close the laptop, and the screen went dark again. The 4 of us screamed and started freaking out. We tried calling Alexa, but now it seemed her phone was off. We didn't have her mom or sister's number, so we all agreed to drive over to Alexa's place to see what was going on. Her mom answered the door in her robe, looking concerned. We asked her if Alexa was home. She said yes and called her down. Alexa never responded though. Her mother said she had just gotten home an hour ago, but that Alexa's door was locked half an hour earlier. We all explained what happened on the Zoom call, and she freaked out and ran upstairs to bang on Alexa's door. That got no answers. We all got a sickly feeling when we realized what could be going on. Alexa's mom called the cops that second, and when Officer Perry showed up, we told him everything. He called for backup and went upstairs to knock on the door and tried to reason with whoever could be in there. When there was no response, he began to kick the door down. When he finally broke through the door, there was no one on the bed. The laptop and phone were left on the bed, but no one was in the room. The window was wide open, enough for someone to crawl through and hop outside down to the awning roof below. We all found Alexa in the basement minutes later. She was hiding under a blanket in the corner of the room. She said when she was home alone, she saw some older man with a big knife sticking out of his pocket in the living room, so she snuck down to the basement and hid. She didn't know when it was safe to come out of hiding, as she couldn't hear her mother getting home. Police backup finally showed up, and the information of the break-in and the man was sent to the local news outlets to alert people to be on the lookout. It's crazy how that Zoom call might have saved Alexa and her mother's lives. A few weeks ago, my friends and I decided to hold a Zoom reunion, as we had not seen each other for quite some time, and all of us finally had the time to chat since there was a lockdown in our country. We're all college students, and most of us had lost contact with each other, so we decided to post on our social media that we would be holding a Zoom reunion, which was open to all the alumni of our old school. We got responses from many people, and we even accepted people we didn't know as long as they knew our mutual friends. We wanted it to be a big social event and didn't really care who joined. Finally, the day of the reunion arrived. I scheduled a meeting and posted it on my Instagram story because there were too many people to individually text, which I now realize was a big mistake because I had basically given everyone access to join the Zoom call. The Zoom meeting began normally, with all of us excited to meet our old friends. We made some new friends through our mutual friends, and we were having a grand time, when someone called sat_an_20 unmuted their mic and started making groaning sounds. We had a friend named Anne, so we thought it was just her pranking us. We texted her to stop because it was getting annoying, but to our surprise she texted back apologizing because she hadn't attended the call due to prior engagements. We were surprised and asked this Anne person to open their video and show us their face or they would be removed from the meeting. They didn't show their face, so I removed them from the meeting. The Zoom call resumed and we were all joking about the incident. Suddenly, my network strength became weak and I had to leave the meeting. I joined back soon after, but SatAn20 had somehow taken the opportunity and re-entered the meeting in the few seconds that we unlocked it. This time they began to share their screen and displayed a video of a black tunnel on loop. We were terrified and a lot of people were leaving the meeting because of it, but my friends and I were determined to find the person who was destroying our reunion. We constantly tried to remove them from the meeting, but the second my friend's network connection weakened, somehow the SatAn20 person became the host. There was nothing we could do now. The account was still playing the video on loop and chanting something in a strange language. We could have left the meeting, but really wanted to know who was disrupting it. Suddenly the video stopped, and SatAn20 started talking in a distorted voice about how my brother Rav had completed the ritual and attained salvation, and we could take their help and do the same too. Here's the thing. I had a twin brother who died before birth. My parents had wanted to name him Rav. They told me when I was very young about his prenatal death and begged me to never talk about him. Only my grandparents and parents knew about him, as the subject was too painful to disclose to others. I had always wanted a twin, and blaming myself for his death, I never told anyone about him. Soon after, we had moved to a new city. I was certain that the only people who knew about my brother in the city were my parents. I had not told even my best friends about him. I had no idea how this SatAn20 person knew about him. They truly had no way of knowing that I knew about. With shaking hands, and now without a doubt convinced that this was a supernatural occurrence, I wordlessly exited the meeting. I do not know what happened afterwards. I didn't respond to my friends' texts and have since not talked to them. To this day, I know this is an experience I will not soon forget. In April of this year, my school had made a virtual classroom thing where we would do all of our assignments online on websites like Google Classroom and whatnot. They also told us about a new tool called Zoom, where students and teachers can all have a virtual meeting to talk about schoolwork and stuff. Well, one day in May, after I finished my assignments, my dad went out on a night shift at his job. So it was only my mom and my mom was asleep. I called my friends, and we all agreed to try a Zoom call out with each other to catch up on how everyone has been, and it also eventually ended with us playing some console games like Call of Duty. At one point, around 10 p.m., we were playing Modern Warfare, and all of a sudden, one of my friends, who I'll call Jack for privacy reasons, suddenly told me that he saw a very sudden blurred movement behind me in my room, but he wasn't sure because my lights were off and the only light was from the TV in my room. I have a somewhat small room with only my bed, a drawer next to my bed, a closet in the left corner of the room, and my TV in the front. That's when I noticed that my pillow was on the floor. I went over to pick it up, and I just dismissed it thinking it accidentally fell or something. So I just went back to play with my friends. About 10 minutes passed by, and Jack once again says he swears he sees movement behind me in my room. When I turned around, I saw that the pillow had fallen again in the exact same spot. This time I became anxious because I knew 100% I put the pillow in a place that it couldn't possibly fall without someone or something moving it. I bend down slowly to pick it up, and then I hear Jack scream. I put the pillow on the bed and rushed over to my laptop sitting on my chair to ask him what was wrong. All he said was to look under my bed, and I saw it. I saw two glowing eyes which were lit up by the TV screen. Once the person realized that I saw them, they immediately jumped out and tried to grab me. I instinctively swung my arm at their head, and I hit him right in the nose. He looked to be at least 45 and had long, dry, straight hair that looked like it hadn't been cut or washed in at least a year. He had a scratchy-looking beard and was a very skinny but tall guy. He looked to be about 6'3". He fell onto my bed and I could see his nose was bleeding, so I took my chance and ran to my mom's room and locked the door. I could hear his footsteps stomping through the house coming towards the room, so I immediately told my mom to call the police despite her groggily shouting at me to tell her what was happening. She called the cops, and by then I could hear his footsteps as he was going from room to room to find where I went. When he came to the room we were in, he tried the handle, and when he saw it was locked, he knew we were in the room. But he didn't bang on the door like I thought he would. Instead, I heard a small chuckle, and then I looked under the little crack under the door, and I could see his feet standing there. As soon as I looked under, he looked through the crack as well, and I could see his bloodshot eye. I also saw a couple drops of blood on the floor, and then on the other side of the door, I heard "You'll pay for that" in a psychotic, high-pitched childish voice. When I backed away, he screamed like a madman and started banging on the door over and over. I started covering my ears, trying to shut the sound out, and I could see my mom crying. Just then, we hear the sirens outside, but the man doesn't stop banging and shouting. The police knock on the door, and when they hear the man, they immediately knock the door down and come in, literally like something from a movie. I heard the man stop, and I thought the police already got him. When I opened the door, I saw the man facing the two officers, looking like he was going to attack them. When he stepped towards them, one of them shot a taser at him, and he immediately fell and started shaking violently. They cuffed him and took him out to the car, and a third officer came to question me and my mom. I told him the whole story, and then the three officers started searching for the place of breaking and entering, and it turned out that he had broken in through the window in my dad's office room, and they found a small axe and drill under my bed in my room. We later found out this man wasn't documented, and no one knew who he was, and he didn't appear to have any family. He was sent to a mental institution, but that's not the worst part. The police later tried to find out where the man originally lived, and all the man told them was that he lived in the woods near my home. When the police went searching for his home for any evidence, they found a small secluded area in the woods with a small wooden shack. When they went in, they told us that they found multiple weapons, bags of old food, and worst of all, two pictures of me, one of me asleep, which was taken from inside the house outside my bedroom door, and one of me eating dinner from outside the window. I hope nothing like this ever happens to anyone, and I hope no one else has to add another bad memory to the long list from this terrible year. These are 3 honeymoon stories. Oftentimes, newlyweds take their honeymoons in foreign countries where the locals may not always speak their native tongue. In one of these stories, that exact scenario proved to be a problem, as a matter of fact. Learning a second or third language can prove to be a very useful skill that will come in handy many times in your life, and the app Babbel has now made learning a new language easier and more fun. All you need is 10 to 15 minutes a day, and within 3 weeks you'll be quickly picking up a new language. Unlike other language apps and websites that may teach you robotic phrases that not even natives may use, Babbel thrives on preparing you for conversational language that you will be able to use in the real world. Also be sure to check out Babbel Live, where you can also take online classes in real time for a more personal approach. Right now, if you buy 6 months, Babbel is offering you an additional 6 months for free. Check the link in the description. For my wife and I's honeymoon, we went to Hawaii. Our hotel was on Maui, which we heard was the best island for couples and honeymoons. The hotel was on the beach, and every night they'd have torch shows, luau's, and other kinds of live entertainment. During the first few days, we did a lot of drinking and restaurant hopping. On our 4th day, we wanted to explore one of the jungle hiking trails, as there are a bunch on the island, and it was on our bucket list for the trip. We drove our rental car a long drive to the nearest parking lot to PPY Trail, a long scenic trail in the bamboo forest in the jungle. The trail would eventually lead to numerous waterfalls and hidden ponds that you could swim in. We were told about it by some locals and other tourists, so that's what we wanted to do. There were a few cars in the parking lot, but the parking lot wasn't just for this one trail. Walking down the path for a while, it truly was just a wall of bamboo on either side of us. It was truly an environment I'd never seen before. My wife stopped us and pointed at a small animal slightly off the trail. It was a mongoose. It was stopped, looking at us, and we both thought it was adorable. My wife started approaching it slowly, bent down to appear smaller and less intimidating. I did the same. Of course, the little creature ran away pretty swiftly, and my wife chased after it goofily. I followed suit. As we got deeper into the jungle, straying away from the trail, we heard the sound of water. It was a waterfall nearby. We followed the sound of it until we came to this beautiful pond with a small waterfall pouring into it. We dipped our feet in the water, and it was a surprisingly comfortable temperature, and it was deep enough to submerge ourselves in. So we decided to do a little skinny dipping, knowing how unlikely it would be that anyone else would be here. Well, apparently we were wrong about that, because as we were in the water, my wife shrieked and said, "Oh my God," as she pointed at some older man in a straw hat with a long gray beard standing in the jungle half behind a tree, staring at us. I'm too nice of a person, so I waved for some dumb reason, instead of yelling to stop creeping on us, because that's what it looked like he was doing. He didn't wave back, he didn't smile, he didn't even move. I looked at my wife and said we should leave, but she didn't want to step out of the water naked for him to see. I kind of agreed. So now I called out to him, asking if he needed something, and only then he called back in a surprisingly deep voice, saying he's looking for his dog. I said we haven't seen it, and then he walked away. I said to my wife we need to go immediately. We got out of the water and got dressed, then tried to find the trail, but we couldn't find it. We strayed far enough away from it that we were apparently lost. We had lost the direction we came from, and there was no cell reception out here. It was getting late in the day, and panic was setting in. By the time the sun was setting, my wife was in tears. All the while, as it got darker and darker, we felt as though we were being followed, hearing footsteps every now and then. It reached the point where the jungle was completely dark now, and we had to use our flashlights on our dying phones. But when we heard footsteps coming from behind us again, I whispered to my wife to turn it off to not reveal ourselves. We felt like we were being followed for hours. After turning out the lights, it was pitch black for a second, until my eyes started adjusting to the darkness. As soon as that happened, I noticed the figure about 10 feet away, and it was slowly creeping closer. I backed away slowly as I pushed my wife behind me. I said, "What do you want?" in a very nervous voice. My wife apparently didn't see him, because she turned her phone's flashlight back on and aimed it at the figure, revealing it to be that old man with a straw hat and beard holding a hacksaw. We both screamed. My wife let out a scream of fear while I screamed "Go, go, go" to her. We ran through the jungle without any lights. There was just enough light to barely see where we were going. We ran and ran and ran, thankfully wearing sneakers and hiking attire. Eventually I got cell reception, so we followed the map back to the parking lot we came from, which took a good 10 to 15 minutes of running. We made it back to the car, and at that point, it felt like we were given a new chance at life. The next day, we went straight to the Maui Police Department and reported the whole incident in an attempt to warn other tourists who may be visiting that specific trail. After that, we tried the best we could to continue our honeymoon, but it definitely put a damper on things. My honeymoon was in Sicily. Our hotels were in Palermo, Cefalù, and Messina in that order. While in Messina, we did most of the sightseeing at sites like Taormina. Messina was packed with beautiful old architecture and museums to explore, which is what my wife Patricia and I enjoy the most. Messina is a port-heavy city, and like the rest of Sicily, there are a lot of English-speaking tourists, but also a lot of Italian-speaking locals. We don't really speak any Italian beyond maybe an elementary level. We'd have a lot of locals approaching us trying to sell us things. At night, the vibe where we were was fun. Lots of music, people drinking and dancing and whatnot. We were partaking a little bit, while also continuing to walk around and explore. The night got the better of us, and we ended up getting pretty drunk, and the time flew by. Pretty soon it was past midnight, and things outside on the streets were simmering down. We took a wrong turn back to our hotel, and kind of lost our way. Eventually we ended up in this sketchy alleyway, and Patricia was getting upset that we seemed to be entering a sketchy area. I put my arm around her to make her feel safer. Suddenly some guy came up to us obnoxiously close, speaking Italian like a machine gun, so quick we couldn't even attempt to understand any words. We couldn't tell if he was angry or concerned, but he seemed frantic. He kept saying this word phantasma. At that moment I didn't know what that word meant. I pushed the guy out of our faces and walked Patricia and I quickly out of the alleyway. He yelled more stuff at us in Italian. I didn't understand a single word of it. As we got away from him, I googled what the word phantasma meant, because it was the only word that he kept repeating that stood out. It means ghost, and when we found that out, we looked at each other. I couldn't help but nervously laugh to try to get Patricia to laugh as well, simply because it sounded ridiculous. We were in this dark, sketchy area of the city for sure. There didn't seem to be anyone else around. We'd normally call an Uber, but it's not even a thing in Sicily, so we had to walk it. I have to admit, I was probably as uncomfortable as Patricia, as we'd heard certain parts of the city were unsafe at night. There was this quiet woman's crying sound coming from behind us all of a sudden. We both heard it, and we both looked back. There was this young but freakishly tall woman about 10 yards away from us, walking slowly in our direction. Her face was buried in her hands. Her height was actually unnaturally tall. She looked taller than me. In fact, it was so creepy that even Patricia, who was usually a sweet, nurturing person, whispered that we should get the hell away from her. We jogged down this narrow street and turned left to another alleyway. And we turned back again to the crying sounds. That woman was now at the end of this alleyway, just behind us, but still walking at the same slow speed, her face still buried in her hands. It felt like we were in this channel of alleyways and narrow one-way streets, and every time we'd turn, we'd still hear the crying behind us. It only stopped when we made it back to, I guess, what you'd call one of the main roads with other civilian traffic besides us. From there, we simply walked back to the hotel. Patricia kept insisting what we saw was a ghost, and every time she said it, it gave me chills. This story doesn't do it any justice in explaining just how disturbing seeing that tall, lanky woman walking towards us in that alleyway was. Not to mention that guy say the word ghost in Italian over and over. I'm not ruling it out as some kind of crazy over-the-top joke. For all I know, we ended up on some Italian YouTube prank channel. But Patricia insists on believing it was actually a ghost we saw, and it still gives me chills thinking about that possibility. We aren't the richest couple out there. We both work 9-to-5 jobs to make ends meet. We're doing all right now, but back when we got married, we were struggling. So when it came time for our honeymoon, we couldn't go all out and blast all our money. My wife, who I'll choose to keep nameless, was doing research for affordable beach getaways, and she found a private house in the Bahamas for 3 nights on Airbnb, so we went with that. After flight tickets and the cost for the rental, it didn't even come out to that much. Upon arrival, we entered the code for the padlock on the door to let ourselves into the home. It had a spacious living room and kitchen, a large bedroom, one bathroom, and a big back deck that led to the private beach. We spent all of the first day on the beach, then walked to a nearby restaurant for dinner. When we got back, this is where the weird things started happening. As soon as we walked in the door, we noticed things seemed like they were in the wrong places, like our sandals, our bags, and so on. Nothing was missing though, so we accused each other of having moved the stuff beforehand. We jumped in the hot tub that was on the back deck for a while, until we both heard something from inside the house, like a bang or a door closing. I got out from the hot tub to check, dripping all over the floor of the house. All the doors were closed though. I didn't remember if they were open earlier or not. Regardless, I checked the room and it was clear of any intruders, as well as the bathroom. I went back outside to grab a towel and put my clothes on. I was done in the hot tub anyway, and so was my wife, though I was growing a little suspicious, or cautious you might say. The second day we sat on the beach for a while again, then went to some of the touristy areas of the Bahamas and did dinner. When we got back, again, we felt like things were different. Our stuff seemed to be in the same spots, but the bathroom and bedroom doors were open, and we didn't remember keeping them open. We knew it was possible we were being paranoid now and didn't actually remember how the doors were left, but still it was getting uncomfortable now. We made sure all the windows and doors were locked, and we skipped the hot tub that night. We just watched movies on the TV in the living room, as there was a bunch of included streaming services on there. There was no upstairs to the house, yet we thought we could hear little taps and whatnot above our heads. Maybe the roof? Maybe an iguana or some similar creature? At this point, we were even starting to think there might be some kind of Bahamian creepy crawly in the house. It seemed like a more logical explanation as to there being an intruder in this relatively small space. That night, I was in bed before my wife. She was in the shower when I heard her scream. I basically exploded out of bed to run into the bathroom. She turned the water off by then and told me that there was something in the vent above the shower. I got on the ledge of the tub and looked in it, but it was too dark in there. However, I did hear some tiny noises coming from in there. This almost confirmed that there was a rodent or some small creature in the vents of the house. Still, we had one more day, it wasn't our problem. We went to bed together. The next thing I remember was waking up to my wife shaking me. She had this horrified look on her face that immediately sent shivers down my spine. She told me to listen, and the silence of the room allowed me to hear it. This frantic whispering sound coming from the ceiling, particularly one of the ceiling vents. That was it. I grabbed my phone to call the owner of the Airbnb. I heard the ringing, but simultaneously I heard this vibrating sound from above us. Immediately I started to think, wait, is there an upstairs that the owner is living in? The vibrating above us stopped almost as quickly as it started, but the call was still ringing on my end. Curiously, I took my phone's flashlight and aimed it up through the vents, and for just a split second, I saw someone looking down through the vent into the room. Most notably, I saw their eyes. We packed all of our important stuff as quickly as we could. It took all of about 30 seconds and we were out the front door. We ran through the sandy dirt road until we came to a street, then we stopped to catch our breaths. We stayed in a cheap hotel that night and the next night as well. The last day we spent most of it waiting at the airport, but we reported this incident to Airbnb and we got all of our money back, and I'm pretty sure Airbnb banned the owner of that house's account. We didn't pursue anything further with legal action, as we were just happy to get our money back. Nothing of ours was missing, but who the hell knows what kind of shady shit he was doing there when we weren't in the house. It's unfortunately very easy for people to find your information online, and that includes your phone number. Whether it's already on the internet public to everybody or available for purchase on websites like White Pages. If you're getting text from an unfamiliar number, it's usually safe to assume it's a scam or someone you might not want to be talking to. A 20-something-year-old girl from Los Angeles, who I'll refer to as Tina, was using an online dating app called OkCupid. She had matched with a guy named Richard, age 26, tall, black hair, average build. Tina says he looked pretty attractive in his pictures, which he had 4 of on his profile, which were all of him posing in different places.
One with his dog, one in his car, one selfie, and one in front of a scenic waterfall. He lived only a couple miles away from Tina, and the two messaged back and forth for a while on the app, mingling over how long they've lived in the city for and where they've been to, etc. Eventually they exchanged numbers and started texting, with Richard quickly suggesting the two go on a date. Some of the text read as follows: "What are you up to tonight?" "Taking care of my dog and then relaxing. I'm exhausted." "Okay, I was gonna ask if you wanted to go on a date or something." "Not tonight. What about tomorrow though?" "Yeah, that works for me. We can go to the Stalking Horse. I think that's like right in the middle of both of us." "Yeah, that works." So the two agreed to a date the following night at a brewery that's not far from either of them. The conversation continues to go completely normal as the two are on their way to the bar. While Tina is on her way in an Uber, it appears that Richard may possibly be walking to the bar. He gets there before her and holds a spot at the bar for them. The text communication stops for a while once Tina lets him know that she's arrived, and so she goes inside to meet him and their date begins. They were in there for about an hour before Tina had to cut the date short due to being completely uncomfortable. She says from the first minute, she knew something about his vibe was off, that he just had a weird aura. She didn't like the way he looked at her, or his mannerisms, or his conversational skills. She found that he'd laugh at uncomfortable things and ask inappropriate questions, and even make weird faces, mostly with his eyes. Around the hour mark, she said she had to head home. Richard insisted he'd walk her home instead of having her Uber. Tina, at the time, says she was way too nice to people and often couldn't say no to things, so she reluctantly agreed to let him walk her home. It was a 20-minute walk, and the whole time she still felt the same unusual energy he'd given off inside the bar. She tried to be short with her answers to him. By the time they got to her apartment, he initiated a hug goodbye at the front of her driveway and she went inside. Not long after, she received this text: "Did I do something wrong? I got the vibe you were acting weird the way back. I was just trying to be nice." "Hey, no, you didn't do anything wrong. I just truthfully feel like we didn't really connect on a deeper level, and that's completely fine. But at this moment in my life, I'm just looking for that special connection with someone. I'm sorry, but I wish you the best. You were very nice." What? It was one date. Obviously, you won't feel a deeper connection immediately. That's what getting to know someone is. It takes multiple dates. "I'm sorry, I just don't think I'm interested." By this point, Richard gets very angry and aggressive, saying things like he wasted $100 on her and telling her to get back on her stupid dating apps. But then after Tina stops answering, Richard sends a very clear threat that he knows where she lives now. Tina sends one final response and then blocks Richard's number. She hoped that would be the end of it, but about 15 minutes after blocking his number, there was a manic pounding at the front door, and the angry screams of Richard were coming from the other side. Tina didn't give any kind of response. She hid in her bedroom until the bangs stopped. When she went to look through the peephole, she saw Richard standing by the side of her door, hiding from view. She called the police on him, and when they showed up, she went outside. Richard was still there, so she showed the officers the text and explained to them that Richard was pounding on her door and she felt threatened. The officers gave him a warning and asked him to leave the premises. Still, knowing Richard now knew where she lived, she wasn't comfortable. In fact, she didn't want to leave her apartment the next night, and when she looked out the peephole again, she saw Richard sitting on the stairs leading up to her apartment, waiting. She once again called the police, and for a second time, the police came and gave Richard another warning, asking him to once again leave the premises. Tina begged them to arrest him and charge him, but they seemed unwilling to do so, saying he wasn't an imminent threat, shockingly. Tina called the guy friend the following few days to come escort her out of her apartment anytime she'd leave to be safe, and Richard was no longer there. But a week later, she received a text from a random number saying, "Are you home?" She didn't answer and blocked the number. Since the police department was unwilling to do anything, Tina ended up moving apartments because of this harassment. This next one was sent to me by a girl named Marissa, who had been contacted by a crazy ex who she hadn't spoken to in years. She dated her ex Dylan on and off for 3 years, and in her words, she didn't have a backbone when she would see him. And even though their relationship was kind of abusive, she'd find herself constantly going back to him. After their final breakup, Marissa asked Dylan to stop contacting her and to pretend she didn't exist. This infuriated him even more, to the point where he knocked on her front door while her parents were home. Her father had to open the door to Dylan, practically trying to fight him when he wouldn't let him in. Things were finally broken off, seemingly for good, when the police got involved. Due to Dylan's history with violence, Marissa's parents convinced her to get a restraining order against him. This, however, didn't prove to be an end-all. For a while, there had been no contact from Dylan. Marissa had blocked any form of contact from him, but there are of course other ways around that, what with fake numbers and fake social media accounts. In June, 2 months after the order of protection had been processed, Marissa got a request on her Instagram from a random account named Kyle. It looked like a regular person, so she allowed it to follow her, but she didn't follow it back. Sometime in June, Marissa had posted a story on her Instagram on a date with a guy she had been talking to, in which she tagged the guy she was on the date with. Shortly after, the guy received death threats in all capitals from the Kyle account, and Marissa received a DM as well, saying he's disgustingly ugly. It was pretty clear this was a fake account now, probably run by Dylan attempting to keep tabs on what's going on in Marissa's life. After using Instagram's feature to block the account and any new ones the person makes, she hoped that would be the end of it. After a few weeks of no attempted contact from Dylan, Marissa one night was sitting in her kitchen on her laptop doing homework, when she got a text message from a random number. It was a picture of her sitting there at the counter on her laptop, taken from outside the kitchen window. She was home alone at this time, so it couldn't have been any of her siblings trying to scare her. She looked out the window to see no one, but the picture was clearly taken moments ago, so someone was out there. She closed the blind to the window and called her dad. While on the phone with him, she saw Dylan outside in the backyard at the door, attempting to slide it open. Marissa's father called 911 for his daughter as he rushed home. Dylan was calling into the house at Marissa, demanding she open the door, getting angrier as time went on and she yelled at him to leave her alone. Dylan got so angry that he punched the glass and broke a hole in it, causing him to start screaming in pain and anger as Marissa saw blood gushing from his hand. Dylan was still in the backyard as police arrived to the house. Marissa grabbed the order of protection document to show them as Dylan was already in handcuffs. Dylan was charged and sentenced to 3 years in prison for violation of the order of protection and vandalism. This allows Marissa and her family some time to breathe and feel safe, but ideally when he's released, they should probably not be living in that same house anymore for their own safety. This last one goes to show why it's probably best not to entertain random numbers texting you for too long. This one comes from a young girl who I'll refer to as Nicole. She was 14 when this happened, living with her parents in a New York City suburb. Next door is another family of 4 with 2 sons. The sons are both older than Nicole and her sister. The younger son, who was 18, named Gene, had tried to talk to Nicole on several occasions despite their age difference. He was a senior in their high school when she was a freshman, which is how they knew each other at all. Whenever Nicole would be outside, Gene would conveniently come out of his house at the same time and always try to talk to her. He would often try to walk to school with her too. Nicole says Gene is slightly unusual, but she can't tell if he's on the spectrum or not. Still, in the past she's tried to be nice to him, and has agreed to walk to school with him before, mostly because it's only a 10-minute walk. Gene has attempted to get Nicole's number multiple times, and she always politely rejected him, saying she's not looking for anything with anyone at the moment. According to her, it was mildly creepy but somewhat innocent behavior, until he started becoming more pushy. When Gene started to make Nicole uncomfortable by seemingly waiting outside for her and invading her personal space, she started asking her mom to drive her to school in the morning to avoid Gene following her or waiting for her. This got him to stop waiting around for her, but things worsened in a different way. One night, Nicole had a boy from school over in her room. Her bedroom is upstairs. The two were sitting on her bed, and Nicole got a text from an unfamiliar number. The text was very unsettling and alarming, because it said, "I thought you said you're not looking for anyone at the moment." Nicole replied, "Is this Gene?" And he replied, "Maybe." Nicole asked him how he got her number, and he said, "You gave it to me, remember?" But she knew for a fact she didn't give it to him, and she told him that. He ignored her confrontation and said, "Who is that in your bed?" This brought the interaction to a much more invasive level, because now it meant that Gene hadn't just seen the two of them enter through the front of the house, but rather he'd been watching them through the window. Nicole looked out her window, which looked to the neighboring house, at a window to a dark room. The light in this room was never on, and it was thought to be a big closet or spare room. But since the light was out, she couldn't see if Gene was standing at that window or not. She lowered the blind and showed her parents the texts. Nicole's parents went next door and had a conversation with Gene's parents, and learned that Gene allegedly has schizoid personality disorder, but whether or not that diagnosis was accurate wouldn't justify creepy, stalkerish behavior like that. Gene never admitted how he was able to get Nicole's number, but there could be multiple explanations, like getting it through a mutual acquaintance or buying it through a public records website like White Pages. Whether Gene's parents' diagnosis of their son was accurate or not, Nicole knew something was not completely normal about him, and she became afraid to leave her house because of him. Nicole's mom continued to drive her to school after this, and for the sake of both of their daughters' happiness, the family moved to another house in the neighborhood not long after this. Gene has not bothered Nicole since.
My older sister Jen is 5 years older than me, and this story also happened 5 years ago. Before Jen was dating her current boyfriend, she used Tinder to meet a few guys. I remember the night specifically. She told me and our other sister Maria that she was meeting a guy at a bar a few blocks down. When she got there, she sat at the bar and texted the guy to let him know where she was sitting. Under a minute passes and a man sits next to her, offering to buy her a drink. This man is significantly older than my sister, and according to her, gave off a horrible smell, had bad breath, and had a crooked front tooth. She told him no thank you right away, as she had a guy coming to meet her. The man didn't get up just yet. He kept sitting there, said he'd buy her a drink in the meantime before her date got there. Jan felt very uncomfortable and asked the man to please leave her alone. The man got up from the bar stool. Jan told us she did a side glance to see where the man had gone, and she said he sat at one of the nearby table booths. Jan texted her date about what just happened and asked him to please hurry. There wasn't a response, so she sits there a few minutes, texts again, "Where are you?" This time the guy responds, "Running late, get a drink or two without me." Now this was an odd text for a guy to send to a girl he's meeting, and to make it even worse, the man from before came back to sit next to Jan, asking where her date was and acting all upset that she was still alone. My sister responded to the man once or twice, then had enough and asked him to please leave her alone once again. She texted her date one more time, saying, "Sorry, I'm gonna leave." And as she sent it, the man's phone, which he left on the bar, vibrated. My sister immediately put two and two together and said she's going to the bathroom. I remember she called our sister Maria asking what to do. Maria told her just leave and drive home. I listened in on the conversation. When Jan left the bathroom, the man was no longer anywhere to be seen in the bar, which I'm sure she found to be a relief. She went straight to her car and started driving home. It's a very linear and short path from that bar, and she was home in probably a couple minutes. When she pulled up in the driveway and started walking to the front door, she noticed another car pull up across the street. It didn't stop directly in front of the house across the street. It stopped one house over. Jan came inside, and from here on, I can tell the story from my own point of view. Maria and I came to greet Jan and ask her what happened. She went to the window and creased the blinds to look outside. She told us there was a car out there before, and she was worried it followed her. But when all three of us looked through the blinds, we didn't see a car out there. So she told us the unsettling story of what happened at the bar. Maria did a better job at comforting her than I. Girl thing, I guess. I did tell her that if that man ever stepped foot near her again, I'd kick his ass. Later on, we all went to our rooms and did our own thing. I was playing Far Cry 4 on my computer when I heard the horrible sound of both my sisters screaming. Now let me shift back to Jan's perspective for a second. She was on her phone in bed when she got a text from that number. It said, "Hey, I'm so sorry, I didn't see your text until I got to the bar." Jan didn't answer that, so he sent a follow-up text saying, "I'm gonna meet you at your house. Which window is yours?" Jan called Maria to come to her room to look at the text. As they talked for a little bit, figuring out what to do, Jan's window slid open and someone tried pushing their way through the roller shade. That was when both Maria and Jan screamed, causing not only me, but our parents from upstairs to come rushing to her room. The man trying to come in gave up before we even made it to the room. Our dad went outside to try and chase after the man, but he was already long gone in his car probably. Of course, my dad called the cops to get a police report. Jen gave the police the man's cell phone number, and they took records of the text conversation. They said they were going to do what they could to trace the number, though it could take a few days. My dad was contacted after the weekend by the local police station, and they asked him to come in. At the station, they said they traced the number to be a fake number through some app, and that there was no guarantee they could trace the use back to a specific phone. My dad asked them to do whatever they could. Weeks passed and we never heard from the police, but we all slowly started to forget about it. You can never really understand people's motives and how they think they'll get away with some things, like climbing into a girl's window, for instance. I've been using the app Hinge to meet new people in the town I just recently moved to. I matched this girl, Kate. She was about 7 years older than me. Yeah, I know, a bit of a gap. She's 30, I'm 23. It was my idea to meet her at some small restaurant in town. I waited in my car in the parking lot for her to pull up. For some reason, she was having trouble finding the place, and she asked me to start sharing my location with her. After doing so, she shortly after pulled up in some lemon of a car, an old beater Honda. I actually felt a sense of disappointment when I saw it was her stepping out of it. I went out to hug her hello. She said she wasn't a hugger though, so I shamefully put my arms back down. Bad start, I was thinking in my head. When we sat down at a table inside, I was able to see that she looked different from her pictures. Worse, like she was the girl in the pictures, sure, but it seemed as though she had her pictures doctored up to make her look better. She also looked to be older than 30. I was already not feeling this date, but I couldn't just end it now. I'd have to sit through the dinner with her. When the waitress came to start us off with drinks, Kate was really awkward. Like the way her voice suddenly raised in volume and intensity as she spoke to the waitress. She stuttered as she kind of rudely said she just wanted water. She turned down my offer for wine. So I went through the whole dinner with her. And in my head, I was really just thinking about how excited I was to get out of there. The check came, and I waited to see if she'd make any offer to chip in for it since I really had no plans of seeing her again. But she did not, so I paid the check and we grabbed our coats and left. I told her I had a really nice time and whatever. Seemed she didn't really want to go home though. I had to kind of force myself to break off because I really just wanted to go home. I said bye and got in my car. She didn't say bye back, she instead just walked to her car. I drove home to my apartment, which is the lower half of someone's house. I didn't even finish hanging up my coat before the doorbell rang. I checked through the window who it could be, and it was Kate. I hadn't stopped sharing my location with her. What could she want? I hadn't forgotten anything at the restaurant, and even if I had, she could have texted me. It was then that I realized this woman might actually be nuts. I walked away from the door and hid in the kitchen with the lights off. I got a text from Kate saying, "I know you're home." I replied, "What do you want? Why are you here?" She texted back, "Answer." I didn't answer that time. I stayed in the kitchen and waited there for a while, until she texted again saying, "I see you at the table, let me in now." She knew I was sitting there. She could see me. In a panic, I looked at all the windows, till I saw the one. It was one of the backyard windows, where I hadn't lowered the shade all the way down. And through that little opening at the bottom, I saw her eyes creeping in. Freaking out, I went to my room and stayed in there with the lights off, while I called 911 to report a trespassing. I had the call on speakerphone so I could read the insane text Kate was sending me. One of her texts said, "Nobody wants me, I'm sick of it." Another said, "You're just like the others." Then, I heard the sound of glass being broken outside my room. I ran to lock my bedroom door and told the operator that she was breaking into my house. The woman on the line said to wait in my room and grab something to use as a weapon. She said the cops would be there shortly. Kate tried the doorknob to my room, and when it wouldn't open, started pounding angrily, yelling for me to open up. I told the 911 operator to send the cops in through the back, as that was how she broke in. Luckily, this town seems to have a fast 911 response time, because cops were there in minutes. 3 cop cars, actually. I heard the cops talking with her, telling her to calm down. That was when I opened the door to see 4 cops around her, with her being already in cuffs. She was taken away and charged with breaking and entering and some other charges. I had the option to take her to civil court for damages to my property, but the time and lawyer fees would be more than the cost to just fix the window, so that's what I did. I did get a restraining order against Kate though, who I later learned her real name was actually Pamela Castillo. It was my first date with a girl from an online dating website. I offered to have her over and cook for her. I'd been out of the dating scene for a long time since I recently broke up with my girlfriend at the time. The woman's name was Amelia. She was 26. I was 32 at the time. I didn't really think having her over for dinner before meeting her was weird. If anything, it would be more relaxed and comfortable than meeting at some bar or restaurant. I was cooking some penne alla vodka with garlic bread and wine, my favorite combo. Amelia arrived around 6:30. I welcomed her in and asked her to take a seat at one end of the kitchen table. I was finishing up the food as I tried to get to know her. She wasn't as talkative as I was expecting based on her appearance. I had to lead most of the conversation. I was slightly nervous given that it was my first time having a first date in years, and it didn't help that she wasn't exactly the easiest to talk to. I served her a plate of food and a glass of wine. Then she asked something odd. She wanted me to go get a candle so that we could have a proper cheers. I had nothing else to say but to go along with it. I left the kitchen to the pantry closet in the hallway to get one of the candles and a lighter. When I came back to the kitchen, I spotted Amelia sitting back down, like very quick-like. It looked kind of sketchy. "Everything okay?" I asked. To which she replied she just had to rinse her hands. Odd, because I didn't hear the sink run. But I moved past it and lit the candle. Then we did a little cheers. I was about to take a sip of my wine when I noticed something floating in the glass, something that wasn't in it before. It looked like a powdery substance being dissolved into the wine. I watched as she looked at me, not taking a sip of my wine. I pretended to take a sip and nervously continued conversation. I was assuming the worst, that she tried to drug me. But I couldn't just accuse her of that. What if I was wrong? I'd look crazy. We ate our food and I cleaned up the table afterwards. She excused herself to the bathroom, which I pointed her to. She was gone for a while, but when she came back, she said she had to get going because her dog was sick. I had no problem with her leaving. I walked her out and hugged her goodbye. I went back to the glass of wine and smelt it, but it didn't smell like anything except wine. I dumped it and made sure nothing was stolen from the kitchen to the hallway to the bathroom. After cleaning, I watched TV while telling my friends that I think she tried to drug me. Then I went to sleep. Actually, I didn't sleep. I have acute insomnia, which comes on and off, and this was one night I just couldn't get shut-eye. I rolled from one side of the bed to the other for hours, and it must have been like 2:30 or something when I heard a cup fall from my kitchen. That terrified me because, well, cups are pretty stationary objects. I didn't see why or how one could have fallen from the counter. Suddenly my door opened and someone stepped inside. I didn't move. I pretended to be asleep, but with one eye half open. Someone stood in front of the doorway for a few seconds, then left the room. I waited a minute before getting up to follow and hopefully get the kitchen phone to call the police. There was a glimmer of light in the living room from the street light outside. With that, I was able to see her body in the corner of the room. She wasn't ducking, nothing. She was just idly staying in place. "Amelia," I said, afraid of what would happen next. She was standing by the knife holder. "Amelia, if you leave right now, I won't call the cops." There was this awful, chilling silence before she put something back on the counter, walked to the back door, and exited. What she put back on the counter turned out to be a knife. When she left, I locked the door first thing, of course. I think when she asked to use the bathroom, she unlocked the back door with plans of returning. This was after her plan to drug me failed. Of course, I called the police, and they took the knife for fingerprints. Based off her criminal background, police later showed up to Amelia's house and arrested her. I did not press charges. Two of my closest friends, Trevor and Kevin, always loved to go on late-night adventures. I have so many fond memories going on creepy midnight exploration sessions with them, but I have some not-so-great ones as well. However, the worst experience was the night we went to Joyland Amusement Park in Kansas, an abandoned park surrounded by a somewhat typical suburban area. We lived only 10 minutes away from the park, so we figured it would be our next late-night destination. We always brought our Phoenix flashlights, backpacks, and boots whenever we went to places like this. Today, mostly everything in Joyland Amusement Park has been torn down, but this was back in like 2011 or 2012, and at that time, most of the buildings and rides were still standing. We pulled up on a side road next to the parking lot since it seemed a lot less sketchy than pulling up into the parking lot itself. Then we figured we should just pull up onto the grass next to the woods by the park, because God forbid if a cop would drive down the road. Kevin led the way while Trevor and I followed behind, talking to each other, sometimes joking about how much more eager Kevin was to move ahead than we were. We kept our voices low, however, because we never knew if there might still be security in places like this. All the carnival shacks that once held concessions and games had now been ransacked, trashed with cans and bottles, and sprayed with graffiti. It was basically the scene that you would expect to see in an amusement park that had been abandoned for years. Even though the park was surrounded by suburbs, it was kind of encased in by woods in almost all directions, so instead of late-night traffic, all we heard were crickets and other night creatures. It added to the experience because, to be honest, all three of us in a certain way liked being freaked out. We walked into another carnival game stand. This one with the paintings at top still not completely worn away or graffitied over. It had some smiling cartoon character holding a dart gun, so I'm guessing it was some kind of target hitting game. Now it was just rubble and litter on the ground. Suddenly there was the sound of a glass bottle breaking not too far away. When we turned in that direction, it became clear it definitely came from the bigger looking building. Perplexed and kind of shaken, the three of us went in that direction. We stopped probably 2/3 of the way there when we saw someone standing in the corner of what was once called the Wacky Shack attraction. The person was legitimately just standing facing the corner wall of the entrance. I whispered at my friends to back away slowly. There was clearly something wrong with this person, and we didn't want them to hear us. We backed away, trying to avoid making any noise. It was almost like something out of a cliché horror movie when either Kevin or Trevor stepped on a beer can, which made a really loud crunch. The person standing in the corner turned their head and looked at us, but the speed in which they turned their head was what really scared me. It was almost like a deer. We could now see it was a man. He had a deranged look on his face. The three of us simply walked quickly away. We didn't run because that would only be more cause for this person to chase us. We made it to the woods where we would cut through to get to the car. Halfway there, Kevin looks back and mutters, "Oh shit." We look back and see the guy just standing stiff next to a tree in the distance, a few meters away. Running seemed like our only sensible option at this point. It didn't take long before we were at the car. We screamed at Kevin to unlock it as he fumbled for his keys. As we got into the car and looked out the windows, we could all see him again, this time once again standing stiff like a statue, hunched over by the tree line to the woods. Kevin drove off, and Trevor and I screamed out taunts to the man. That didn't mean we weren't still absolutely shaken permanently. It's scary to think that none of us ever actually saw that weird man move. He seemed to always be standing still whenever we saw him. I was taking my family on a road trip to South Florida. It was a long 2-day drive, and I could tell my kids were getting restless. I saw a sign for an amusement park zoom by on the parkway, so I figured I'd treat my kids and take them to an amusement park for a couple hours. It was late already anyway, so we were just going to stop at the hotel soon. I figured I might as well. My wife and I followed our 2 kids, Tommy, 7, and Trish, 5. They ran ahead of us to find a ride they wanted to go on. I had to admit, this was one pathetic-looking amusement park. There weren't many other people there. There weren't many attractions either. More than half of what appeared to once be attractions and games were now just empty stands and buildings. As long as the kids were happy though, that's all that really mattered. Tommy was running so far ahead, pointing at one of the rides ahead in the dark. I thought for sure he was pointing to the Ferris wheel, but when he made an unexpected turn left and out of sight, my wife and I screamed for him to come back here immediately. When he didn't come back, I told my wife to wait there with Trish while I ran as fast as I could to chase after Tommy. I couldn't find him anywhere though. My heart began to race. The feeling of losing your small child is a painfully scary feeling that will literally make you feel sick inside. I stood in place looking around in a full 360 motion, breathing heavily, afraid someone might have taken my son. I ran to the nearest worker I could find and gave them my son's description. They called on a loudspeaker for Tommy to come to the front entrance. In the meantime, I still ran all over the place searching for him. I stopped dead in my tracks and I felt my heart drop when I found him. He was over by a wall of bushes next to a bathroom building. He was talking to someone who was apparently in the bushes. Then it looked like he was pulled into the bushes. I screamed Tommy's name as I took a break for the bushes. There was nobody around to serve as a witness or come and help me. I got to the bushes and heard Tommy talking to someone. I didn't hear the other person's voice though. I pushed my way through the bushes and saw Tommy being pulled. I didn't see by who though. I ran to him and pulled him, but I felt something else on the other side of another layer of bushes pulling him in that direction. But quickly, whatever it was let go, and I pulled Tommy into my arms. I told him to wait there as I pushed my way through more bushes to a small opening surrounded by trees. There was no one in sight. I had no idea how whoever it was could have gotten away that quickly. I still don't. When I got back to my son, I took him back in public eye of the park and put my hands on his shoulders, shaking him as I was asking him who he was walking with. He said he was following some guy named George. He said George was a lot older than him. I took him back to the front entrance of the amusement park and had him describe George to the workers. They said they'd keep a sharp lookout for him, and we promptly left the park. We went straight to a hotel, and the rest of our trip from there was normal, except for the fact that I couldn't get the incident out of my head. I used to work at a little theme park called Thrillville, USA. No, not the video game. There was an actual amusement park called Thrillville. It was very tiny and secluded though, so don't picture a big place like Six Flags or something in your head. I never enjoyed working there because my shift would always be something different every day, and there was an insane amount of weirdos there. But that's irrelevant. The park closed in 2007, and ever since, I've been from job to job in this shitty country-ass town. One cloudy evening on my own in 2009, I decided it would be fun to go check out what's become of Thrillville, since it had been shut down and abandoned for 2 years at the time. I pulled up to the parking lot, which was of course empty. The grass surrounding the park was now overgrown, and the overgrown grass waved around in the breeze, suggesting an incoming storm. Sneaking in was easy considering it wasn't fenced off or anything, but it was clear some things had already been torn down. Still, at the time, mostly everything was still standing, but it had become so much creepier now. I began to feel tiny rain droplets, but I didn't really care. I was dressed for rain anyway. Walking around the park was creepy, but the first really disturbing thing didn't actually happen until I heard something scutter behind me. To be honest, I couldn't tell if it was a person or an animal, but something was definitely there. I didn't see anything though, so I just pressed onward, choosing to ignore it. I was snapping constant pictures with my Canon camera that I took along because for a few months I was kind of into photography. You know, a passing interest. I snapped away at different buildings, the defunct roller coaster, the big old yellow slide that was now covered in mud stains. Then there were the buildings like the bathrooms, the main office, the varying maintenance shacks. I decided I would start with the bathrooms. I don't know why I thought that would be interesting, but I did. I stepped into the men's side of the bathrooms, which was obviously pitch black inside. The lights no longer worked, so I had to turn on the flash on my camera, kind of like that scene from the first Saw movie. I took a picture of the sink and mirror and checked the image quality. The light flash on my camera was very bright, so pictures in the dark always came out clear. Then I heard the slightest little ting sound. It came from the side of the bathroom with the stalls. I called out, "Is someone in here?" There were 2 stalls from what I remember. I went over to the first stall and pushed the stall door open slowly. I aimed my camera into the stall and took the picture. The light revealed nothing but a toilet in the stall. I moved on to the next stall and pushed the door open. With this one, I was having trouble drawing up the nerve to take the picture. I took about 5 seconds before I pressed the button, and the camera light flashed, and in that brief moment of light, I saw a tall figure looming down at me. I shut the stall door and screamed as I ran back outside to the light and to my car. When I got to my car, I checked the picture I captured in that stall. In the picture was a figure, probably 6'3", standing in front of the toilet, but for some reason the face was blurry. I couldn't see any distinguishing features, but it seemed to be a man. As I browsed through some of the other photos, I picked up on something disturbing. In 4 photos out of 10, I found what appeared to be a person hiding somewhere in the distance, but always seemed to be staring at me. In 2 pictures, the person was in the woods. In 2 others, they were behind buildings or rides. I never sent those pictures from my camera onto my computer, but I think they're still on the camera. I just haven't seen it in years. It might be in my attic. If I find it, I'll post them online, but I quite frankly never want to see that picture again.